Have you ever wondered what really happened in the past? Beyond the pages of textbooks lies a world of fascinating tales, extraordinary figures, and incredible events. Join me as we explore them on Exploring History in Sleep. Elara, a simple village girl with sun-kissed hair and crystal-clear eyes, found her life taking a fateful turn when she encountered Prince Theron during a hunting expedition. Their initial interactions sparked a romance reminiscent of a fairy tale, filled with secret rendezvous and heartfelt vows. However, this dreamlike beginning shattered with the harsh truth. Theron's affection turned out to be nothing more than a deceit. He was seeking a wife of common birth to conceal a dark secret capable of shaking the kingdom to its core. Elara, with her innocent appearance and background, became a mere pawn in his sinister scheme. Their hasty marriage unfolded amidst false well-wishes and the cold gazes of those privy to the truth. Elara, once a hopeful village girl, transformed into a royal consort imprisoned within a gilded cage, her heart and future shackled. Whispers began to encircle her within the castle, filled with scrutinizing glances and artificial smiles, each one like a sharp dagger piercing her heart. What secret did Theron conceal, and what motives drove him to choose Elara, a complete stranger to the world of power and intrigue? Would Elara ever uncover the horrifying truth behind their marriage, and what ultimate price would she pay for her life within the castle's cold walls? The story promises to delve deep into the secrets hidden within the ancient stones, where whispers from the past still echo, and a life slowly fades into the darkness. Story 1. Moonlit Whispers and the Dawn of Deceit. Come closer, friends, draw near and let the imagined chill of a medieval night seep into your bones, for the tale I am about to unfold is one where shadows dance with secrets, and the very stones of Castle Ethelgard seem to exhale the sighs of forgotten souls. Leave behind the clamor of your modern lives, the relentless glow of your screens, and journey with me to a time when darkness was a tangible presence, and the only solace against it was the flickering embrace of candlelight and the distant, often indifferent, gaze of the moon. It is beneath such a moon, a sliver of ivory hanging in a velvet sky, that our story takes its first, tentative breath. There was a hush that night, a deceptive stillness that often presages a storm, a tremor in the very fabric of existence. The wind, usually a mournful spirit weaving through the castle ramparts, held its breath, as if even the elements paused to witness the unfolding drama. High in the western tower of Ethelgard, a lone figure stood silhouetted against the moon-kissed clouds. This was not a sentinel guarding his lord's domain, nor a scholar lost in the arcane mysteries of the cosmos. This was Elara, and the silence of the night mirrored the unnerving calm that had descended upon her in the hours that stretched like an eternity before this moment. Elara, as you now know, was not born to the stone and grandeur of Ethelgard. Her roots lay deep in the sun-drenched valley that cradled the castle's formidable base, a place where life was dictated by the turning of the earth, where worries seldom extended beyond a prosperous harvest and the well-being of the livestock. Her days were a tapestry woven with the honest labor of the fields, her evenings filled with the simple warmth of family and the comforting rhythm of her village. Her spirit was as radiant as the summer dawn, her laughter as pure as the crystal springs that tumbled down the mountainside. Until Theron. Prince Theron, the golden scion of the Eldorian throne, was a figure etched into the very consciousness of their world, a name whispered with a mixture of reverence and anticipation. His rare forays into the surrounding countryside were usually reserved for the exhilaration of the hunt, a fleeting escape for the nobility from the suffocating rituals of courtly life. It was during one such excursion, amidst the dappled sunlight filtering through the ancient canopy of the royal forest, that their paths intersected, not in a clash of bodies, but in a meeting of gazes that would irrevocably alter the course of Elara's unassuming existence. He was the embodiment of a young woman's whispered desires, strikingly handsome with a captivating intensity that flickered in his deep-set eyes, his voice a silken melody that promised untold wonders, and an aura of command that both humbled and intrigued. For Elara, whose world had been populated by the rough-hewn charm of village lads, Theron was a vision, a creature seemingly sculpted from moonlight and shadow, a being from a realm beyond her wildest imaginings. He spoke of a world beyond the familiar horizons of her valley, of resplendent halls and glittering courts, but more importantly, he spoke to her, he saw her, in a way that no one in her simple life ever had. Their clandestine meetings became the stolen jewels of her days, whispered intimacies veiled by the deepening twilight, each stolen moment weaving an intricate tapestry of dreams within her innocent heart. She believed his pronouncements, clung to his fervent assurances of a future where their love would effortlessly bridge the seemingly insurmountable chasm of their disparate social standings. Ah, the tender vulnerability of youth, the intoxicating, often blinding power of first love. But as the moon waxes and wanes, so too do illusions often crumble, revealing the stark reality beneath. The fairy tale that Elara had so readily embraced began to unravel with the sudden, almost brutal efficiency of a winter squall. Theron's impassioned declarations, the stolen kisses beneath the ancient, gnarled oaks, the whispered promises that echoed in the stillness of the night, they were all meticulously crafted falsehoods, each word a carefully chosen stone in a formidable wall of deceit. His heart, it transpired, was not his to freely give. It was already burdened by a secret, a malevolent shadow that clung to him like the persistent dampness of the castle fog, a truth so volatile it threatened to shatter the very foundations upon which the kingdom of Eldoria rested. He sought a wife, yes, but not a partner for his soul, nor a queen to stand beside him in genuine affection and shared destiny. He needed a shield, a bulwark against the storm that brewed within the castle walls, someone whose unremarkable origins would attract no undue attention, someone whose very ordinariness would serve as the perfect, impenetrable camouflage for his extraordinary and perilous predicament. Elara, with her unblemished reputation and her life lived far from the intricate machinations of the royal court, was the tragically ideal candidate, a blank canvas upon which he could paint his elaborate and ultimately destructive lie. Her background, as you might now surmise, was not a point of connection for him, but rather a carefully selected tool, a means to a desperate and self-serving end. The whirlwind courtship, a dizzying ascent for Elara from the quietude of her village to the bewildering grandeur of the castle, culminated in a wedding ceremony that was as breathtaking in its opulent scale as it was utterly devoid of genuine sentiment. The vast halls of Ethelgard, usually resonating with the boisterous sounds of courtly life, seemed to hold a strained, almost suffocating silence, a palpable tension that Elara, lost in her naive joy, failed to fully comprehend. The assembled courtiers offered their congratulations with practiced, almost unervingly perfect smiles, their eyes often betraying a fleeting flicker of something unreadable: pity? Disdain? A chilling awareness of the elaborate charade unfolding before them? The very air within the castle walls seemed thick with unspoken words, with secrets that clung to the ancient tapestries and whispered in the shadowy recesses of the vaulted ceilings. And so Elara, the bright-eyed girl of the valley, became the Royal Consort, a title that should have heralded an era of unprecedented honor and profound happiness, but instead felt like a heavy, intricately wrought chain binding her to a life she did not understand, a world where the rules were unspoken and the dangers unseen. The gilded cage had sprung shut with a silent, inexorable click, its bars not forged of iron, but of rigid etiquette, of suffocating unspoken expectations, of the constant, unnerving scrutiny of the royal court. Her heart, once soaring with the boundless wings of love, now felt leaden, a captive within the cold, imposing grandeur of Ethelgard. The whispers began almost immediately, subtle at first, like the rustling of silk in the long, echoing corridors, but gradually growing in intensity, in insidious malice. They followed her like persistent shadows, clinging to the periphery of her awareness. The impeccably dressed ladies-in-waiting, with their carefully painted smiles and their sharp, assessing eyes, spoke in hushed, conspiratorial tones behind their delicate, lace-trimmed hands. The seasoned lords of the court, their faces etched with the indelible lines of years spent navigating the treacherous currents of political maneuvering, offered veiled glances, their animated conversations abruptly ceasing as she innocently approached. Even the very stones of the ancient castle seemed to murmur secrets, tales of past betrayals and long-forgotten tragedies, their silent language a constant, unsettling hum beneath the surface of courtly life. These were not the gentle whispers of admiration or the warm murmurs of welcome. They were the sharp, probing whispers of speculation, the cold, calculating whispers of suspicion, the dismissive whispers of a world that viewed her as an interloper, an inexplicable anomaly within their tightly knit hierarchy. They questioned her lineage, her provincial manners, her very audacity to occupy such an elevated position within their intricate social tapestry. And beneath the veneer of their polite inquiries and their carefully constructed civility, Elara sensed a deeper, more sinister current, a shared knowledge that she was deliberately excluded from, a heavy, unspoken truth that hung in the air like a palpable weight, patiently waiting for its inevitable, devastating fall. What was the dark secret that Prince Theron so desperately sought to conceal beneath the cloak of his charming facade? What malevolent darkness lurked beneath the polished veneer of the seemingly glorious royal court? Why had he chosen her, a seemingly insignificant lamb led unknowingly to the slaughter, a naive girl plucked from the obscurity of her simple life and thrust into the very heart of a viper's nest of political intrigue and hidden agendas? And what unimaginable price would she ultimately be forced to pay for this sudden, bewildering ascent, for this life now lived under the cold, watchful, and increasingly hostile eyes of Castle Ethelgard? These unanswered questions, like insidious, thorny vines, began to relentlessly around Elara's once joyful heart, their silent, suffocating pressure a constant, chilling reminder that her fairy tale had irrevocably morphed into a terrifying drama, and the moonlit whispers within the castle walls were merely the prelude to a story where the price of a fleeting, imagined love might very well be her very life. The moon, still a silent sentinel in the inky sky, offered no solace, only its cold, indifferent witness to the unfolding tragedy. And as Elara stood there, on the precipice of a horrifying truth she could not yet fully comprehend, the first icy tendrils of fear began to snake their way into her unsuspecting heart, a chilling premonition of the profound darkness that lay ahead, a darkness where whispers often paved the treacherous path to screams. Story 2. The Fateful Glade and the Prince's Shadowed Gaze. The memory of that day in the royal forest clung to Elara like the scent of wood smoke on a winter's cloak, vivid, persistent, and tinged with a bittersweet ache. It had seemed, in its initial unfolding, like a scene lifted directly from the ballads sung in her village, tales of chance encounters leading to unexpected romance. The sun had filtered through the dense canopy in golden shafts, illuminating a hidden glade carpeted with wildflowers, their vibrant hues a stark contrast to the muted greens and browns of the surrounding woods. The air hummed with the drowsy drone of bees and the distant calls of unseen birds, a symphony of nature that now, in the cold silence of Castle Ethelgard, felt like a forgotten melody from a happier life. She had been gathering herbs, a skill passed down through generations of women in her family, her fingers deftly selecting the leaves and blossoms needed for their simple remedies. Her mind, usually filled with the quiet concerns of her daily life, had been momentarily adrift, lost in the beauty of the natural world surrounding her. It was in this state of peaceful reverie that she first saw him. He emerged from the shadows of the trees like a figure conjured from a dream, Prince Theron, mounted on a magnificent black steed that seemed to ripple with contained power. He was dressed in the rich forest green hunting attire of the nobility, the gold embroidery glinting in the sunlight, a stark visual contrast to the simple spun fabric of her own gown. He was the very embodiment of the romantic heroes of her village tales, a figure of undeniable charisma and an almost magnetic presence. Their meeting was, by all accounts, accidental. His hunting party had veered off course, drawn by the scent of a rare stag, and their pursuit had led them to the secluded glade where Elara quietly worked. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, had met hers, and in that single fleeting moment Elara felt a jolt, a strange awareness that something profound had shifted within her. He dismounted with an easy grace that spoke of a life lived in effortless command, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. He spoke to her with a disarming charm, his words weaving a spell of attention that made her feel as though she were the only person in the vast forest. He inquired about her task, his voice a low, resonant melody that seemed to vibrate through her very being. He spoke of the beauty of the glade, the skill required to identify the various herbs, and in his words, Elara felt a validation she had never experienced before. He saw not just a peasant girl, but someone with knowledge, with a connection to the natural world that even he, a prince, seemed to admire. Their subsequent encounters felt similarly charmed, stolen moments snatched from the periphery of his royal duties. He would seek her out in the valley, his presence a thrilling disruption to the predictable rhythm of her days. They met beneath the ancient oaks that stood sentinel at the edge of her village, their gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like the arms of ancient gods. He spoke of his life at the castle, painting vivid pictures of grand balls and powerful figures, but always returning his focus to her, making her feel as though she held a unique place in his otherwise privileged world. He learned of her family, her simple life, her dreams for the future. He listened with an attentiveness that seemed genuine, his questions thoughtful, his responses laced with a tenderness that made her heart soar. He spoke of his own burdens, the weight of his future responsibilities, hinting at a loneliness that only she, it seemed, could alleviate. He painted a future where their love could bridge the divide between their worlds, a future where her gentle spirit could bring light and warmth to the often cold and calculating atmosphere of the court. And Elara, her heart blossoming like the wildflowers in their meeting glade, believed him. She clung to his every word, every stolen touch, every whispered promise under the silvery light of the moon. She saw in him not just a prince, but a soulmate, someone who truly understood her, who cherished her for who she was, not for her station in life. The secret rendezvous became the very essence of her existence, the anticipation of their next meeting a bright flame that warmed her through the long hours of work. The world around her seemed to fade in significance, overshadowed by the intensity of this burgeoning love. He spoke of marriage, not in grand pronouncements befitting a royal heir, but in hushed, intimate tones, as though their love was a precious secret to be guarded from the prying eyes of the world. He spoke of a quiet ceremony, a life shared away from the stifling expectations of the court, a future where their love would be the foundation of their happiness. These whispered promises were the sweetest melodies Elara had ever heard, and they resonated deep within her soul, planting seeds of hope that grew into a fervent belief in their shared destiny. Looking back now, from the cold, isolating reality of her life within Castle Ethelgard, Elara could see the subtle inconsistencies, the fleeting shadows that should have served as warnings. The hurried nature of their meetings, his reluctance to be seen with her by anyone of rank, the vague explanations for his sudden departures, all now seemed like glaring omissions in the otherwise perfect picture he had painted. But love, especially first love, has a remarkable ability to blind one to the inconvenient truths, to filter out the discordant notes in the otherwise harmonious melody. The memory of that first encounter in the sun-drenched glade, the way his eyes had held hers, the sound of his voice, it was a moment etched into her soul, a moment that had irrevocably altered the course of her life. It was a meeting that had felt like destiny, a chance encounter blessed by the beauty of nature itself. But now, shrouded in the oppressive silence of the castle, under the watchful gaze of a different, far more indifferent moon, Elara knew with a chilling certainty that what had felt like the dawn of a beautiful love story was, in truth, the dawn of a carefully constructed deceit, a web of lies spun with the deliberate intention of ensnaring her in a life far removed from the idyllic dreams he had so skillfully conjured in the secluded glade of their first, fateful meeting. The whispers in the castle had begun, and the echo of his honeyed words now sounded like the cruelest mockery in the cold, unforgiving air. Story 3. The False Song in the Garden of Eden. The echoes of Theron's honeyed words, once the sweetest music Elara's heart had ever known, now resonated within the cold stone walls of Ethelgard like a discordant symphony, a cruel reminder of the paradise he had painted, a paradise that had never truly existed. The memory of their stolen moments in the valley, once cherished like precious jewels, now felt like shards of glass piercing her soul, each recollection a fresh wave of bewildered pain. The vibrant hues of the wildflowers in their secret glade, once symbols of a blossoming love, now seemed garish, a mocking testament to the beauty that had masked such profound deception. The transition from the simple, honest world of her village to the intricate, treacherous landscape of the royal court had been jarring, a dizzying ascent into a realm governed by unspoken rules and veiled intentions. The very air in Ethelgard felt thick with secrets, each hushed conversation, each fleeting glance, seeming to carry a weight of meaning that Elara could not yet decipher. She moved through the grand halls like a ghost, a silent observer in a play she did not understand, her initial awe at the castle's splendor quickly giving way to a gnawing unease, a sense of being adrift in a sea of unfamiliar customs and watchful eyes. The wedding itself, a spectacle of breathtaking grandeur, now seemed in her memory like a meticulously staged performance, a public affirmation of a lie. The joyous peal of the church bells, the elaborate vows exchanged before the solemn-faced clergy, the seemingly heartfelt congratulations of the assembled nobility, all now rang hollow, devoid of the genuine emotion that should have marked such a sacred union. Theron's touch, once electric and reassuring, now felt distant. His eyes, when they met hers amidst the throng of well-wishers, held a guarded quality, a fleeting shadow that she instinctively recognized as a barrier, a wall erected between them even as they stood united before the eyes of the kingdom. The early days of her marriage were a bewildering whirlwind of unfamiliar rituals and stifling etiquette. She was introduced to a dizzying array of lords and ladies, their names and titles a confusing jumble, their pronouncements often veiled in layers of courtly politeness that masked underlying power struggles and subtle alliances. Elara, accustomed to the straightforward honesty of her village, found herself constantly second-guessing the true meaning behind their carefully chosen words, the sincerity behind their practiced smiles. She longed for the simple camaraderie of her former life, the easy laughter and unvarnished truths of her family and friends. Theron, in these early days, was a distant figure, his attention seemingly consumed by the affairs of state, the endless meetings with advisers, the intricate dance of royal politics. He offered her perfunctory smiles in public, fulfilled his expected duties with a detached air, but the intimacy they had shared in the secluded valley seemed to have vanished, replaced by a formal courtesy that chilled Elara to the bone. The whispered intimacies under the moonlight were now replaced by the echoing silence of their vast, opulent chambers, the shared glances of affection replaced by the fleeting, guarded looks across crowded banquet halls. She tried to bridge the growing chasm between them, to rekindle the warmth of their initial connection. She spoke of their shared memories, of the beauty of the valley, of the promises they had made beneath the ancient oaks. But her gentle inquiries were met with polite evasions, with vague pronouncements about the pressures of his station, the weight of his responsibilities. His eyes, once filled with a seemingly genuine affection, now held a distant, almost weary quality, as if the very mention of their past was a burden he would rather avoid. It was in these moments of growing isolation that Elara began to notice the subtle undercurrents of the court, the hushed conversations that ceased abruptly upon her approach, the knowing glances exchanged between certain lords and ladies. She sensed a shared secret, a piece of the puzzle that remained tantalizingly out of her reach. The whispers that followed her through the castle corridors were no longer just about her humble origins. They carried a new weight, a sense of something hidden, something significant that involved not just her, but the very fabric of the royal court. One evening, wandering through the dimly lit corridors, seeking a moment of solitude amidst the suffocating grandeur, Elara overheard a fragment of a conversation that sent a shiver of unease down her spine. Two elderly courtiers, their faces etched with years of service and secrets, spoke in hushed tones behind a heavy tapestry. She caught only a few disjointed phrases: the king's illness, the succession, the prince's arrangement. The word arrangement hung in the air like a poisonous vapor, and though she could not grasp its full meaning, Elara felt a primal instinct that it was somehow connected to her unexpected elevation to the position of royal consort. The king's illness had been a subject of hushed speculation within the court, a shadow hanging over the otherwise opulent proceedings. He was a man of advanced years, his health increasingly fragile, and the question of succession loomed large, casting long shadows of ambition and uncertainty throughout the castle. Theron, as the heir apparent, was the focus of much attention, his every action scrutinized, his every pronouncement analyzed for any hint of his future intentions. The word arrangement, coupled with the hushed tones and the context of the king's failing health and the succession, planted a seed of doubt in Elara's mind, a nagging suspicion that her marriage to Theron was not the fairy-tale romance she had so desperately believed it to be. Could it be that their union was not born of love, but of political expediency, a calculated move in the intricate game of royal power? The thought was a chilling one, a stark contrast to the passionate declarations Theron had whispered in the secluded valley. As the days turned into weeks, Elara's unease grew into a gnawing anxiety. She observed Theron more closely, searching for clues in his guarded expressions, in the subtle nuances of his interactions with the other members of the court. She noticed the almost imperceptible deference in the eyes of certain powerful lords, the knowing smiles exchanged with his closest advisers. It was as if there was a shared understanding, a secret pact to which she was not privy. The vibrant tapestry of their initial romance, once so vivid in her memory, began to fade, its bright colors replaced by the muted grays and somber blacks of suspicion and doubt. The sweet melody of Theron's words now sounded like a carefully constructed lie, a deceptive tune played to ensnare her in a game she did not understand. The paradise he had painted in the secluded glade now seemed like a cruel mirage, a beautiful illusion that had masked a far more sinister reality. Elara found herself increasingly isolated, a lonely figure amidst the opulent grandeur of Ethelgard. She yearned for a confidant, someone she could trust, someone who could shed light on the growing darkness that seemed to be enveloping her. But in the treacherous landscape of the royal court, trust was a rare and precious commodity, and Elara knew no one she could truly confide in. The whispers in the castle continued, no longer just about her origins, but now carrying a more ominous tone, a sense of impending revelation, a feeling that the carefully constructed facade of her fairy-tale marriage was about to crumble, revealing the cold, hard reality beneath. The Garden of Eden Theron had promised now felt like a prison, and the sweet song of his love had transformed into a deceptive lullaby, masking a truth that threatened to shatter her world. Story 4. Royal Conspiracy. Elara's life hangs in the balance. The fragmented conversation Elara had overheard, those hushed words hanging heavy with unspoken meaning, the king's illness, the succession, the prince's arrangement, began to fester in her mind like a slow-acting poison. The idyllic image of her marriage, already tarnished by Theron's growing detachment and the court's veiled scrutiny, now began to crack, revealing the jagged edges of a potential conspiracy. The arrangement, the very word felt cold and calculating, utterly devoid of the warmth and spontaneity she had associated with their initial courtship. It suggested a transaction, a carefully orchestrated maneuver, rather than a union born of genuine affection. Driven by a growing sense of dread, Elara began to observe the interactions within the court with a newfound intensity. She became a keen student of subtle glances, of carefully modulated tones, of the pregnant silences that often punctuated seemingly innocuous conversations. She noticed the almost imperceptible shift in the deference shown to Theron by certain powerful figures, a subtle air of anticipation that seemed to hum beneath the surface of courtly decorum. It was as if they were all waiting for something, a significant event that would irrevocably alter the balance of power within the kingdom. One evening, during a formal banquet, a lavish affair filled with glittering chandeliers and the clinking of goblets, yet permeated by an undercurrent of palpable tension, Elara's gaze fell upon Theron as he conversed with Lord Valerius, one of the king's most trusted advisers. Valerius, a man whose face was a roadmap of political intrigue, leaned in close to Theron, his words inaudible amidst the din of the hall, yet his expression was one of intense seriousness. Theron's response, a curt nod and a fleeting, almost predatory smile, sent a fresh wave of unease through Elara. There was a coldness in his demeanor, a ruthlessness that she had never witnessed in their stolen moments in the valley. This was not the charming prince who had whispered promises beneath the moonlight. This was a man consumed by ambition, his eyes fixed on a distant prize. Later that night, unable to find solace in the vast emptiness of their shared chambers, Elara sought refuge in the castle library, a sprawling sanctuary of ancient tomes and forgotten histories. The silence within its hallowed walls offered a temporary respite from the incessant whispers of the court. As she wandered through the towering shelves, her fingers trailing over the leather-bound spines, she stumbled upon a hidden alcove, tucked away behind a heavy curtain. Curiosity piqued, she drew back the curtain and found herself in a small, dusty room filled with old ledgers and scrolls. Among the forgotten documents, one particular ledger caught her eye. Its cover was plain, its pages yellowed with age, but the royal crest embossed upon it hinted at its significance. With trembling hands, Elara opened the ledger, her eyes scanning the faded ink. The entries were meticulous, detailing financial transactions and royal decrees from years past. But as she delved deeper, she discovered a series of entries that chilled her to the bone. They referred to a substantial sum of gold being transferred to Lord Valerius, accompanied by cryptic notes about arrangements and ensuring the succession. The dates of these transactions coincided with the period leading up to her sudden and unexpected marriage to Theron. The pieces began to fall into place with a sickening clarity. The king's failing health, Theron's urgent need for a wife, the substantial payment to a key advisor known for his political maneuvering. It all pointed towards a calculated scheme, a conspiracy to secure Theron's ascension to the throne, and Elara, it seemed, was an unwitting pawn in this dangerous game. Her humble background, her lack of political connections, her very innocence, these were not the qualities of a beloved bride, but the convenient attributes of a figurehead, someone who would not question the decisions of her powerful husband, someone who could be easily controlled. The realization hit Elara with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless and reeling. The idyllic love story she had so desperately clung to was a cruel fabrication, a carefully constructed illusion designed to lure her into this gilded cage. The man she had given her heart to, the prince who had whispered sweet promises in the moonlight, was a man capable of such cold and calculated deception. Her life, her future, her very happiness, all had been sacrificed for his ambition. The whispers in the castle now took on a new, sinister meaning. They were not just the murmurings of a curious court, they were the echoes of a conspiracy, the silent acknowledgment of the lie upon which her marriage was built. The knowing glances she had witnessed, the hushed conversations that ceased upon her approach, they were not born of mere curiosity about her origins, but of a shared knowledge of the deceit that had brought her to Ethelgard. Fear, cold and sharp, began to grip Elara's heart. She was trapped in a web of political intrigue, surrounded by powerful figures who were clearly complicit in Theron's scheme. Who could she trust? To whom could she turn for help? The very walls of the castle seemed to press in on her, their silent grandeur now feeling like a suffocating prison. Her life, once filled with the simple joys of the valley, now hung precariously in the balance. She was married to a man she no longer recognized, a man whose ambition seemed to eclipse any semblance of human emotion. She was surrounded by a court that viewed her with suspicion or, worse, with pitying knowledge of her unwitting role in their political machinations. The ledger in her hands felt like a death sentence, a tangible piece of evidence that confirmed her deepest fears. She was not a beloved wife. She was a tool, a means to an end. And as the weight of this devastating realization settled upon her, Elara knew that she could not remain a passive victim. The innocent girl from the valley might have been easily deceived, but the woman who now stood in the dusty alcove of the royal library, clutching the damning evidence of a royal conspiracy, was beginning to awaken to the perilous reality of her existence. The whispers in the castle had revealed their true, sinister nature, and Elara knew that her survival depended on her ability to navigate this treacherous landscape, to uncover the full extent of Theron's deceit, and to somehow, against all odds, reclaim a life that had been so cruelly stolen from her. The dawn of deceit had broken, and for Elara, the fight for her very life had just begun. Story 5. The castle's walls have ears. Who can Elara trust? Clutching the aged ledger, its yellowed pages whispering the chilling truth of Theron's arrangement, Elara felt a profound sense of isolation descend upon her, heavier and more suffocating than the oppressive silence of the castle library. The very stones around her seemed to possess a malevolent sentience, their cold surfaces bearing witness to the elaborate deception that had ensnared her. The grand tapestries, once admired for their intricate artistry, now appeared to depict scenes of betrayal and hidden agendas. The flickering candlelight cast long, dancing shadows that mimicked the furtive movements and veiled glances she had begun to notice within the court. The realization that her marriage was a carefully orchestrated political maneuver, a means to secure Theron's ascent to the throne, had shattered the last vestiges of the fairy tale she had so desperately clung to. The man she had believed to be her soulmate was revealed to be a calculating schemer, his honeyed words now tasting like bitter ash in her mouth. The idyllic memories of their stolen moments in the valley were now tainted by the knowledge of his duplicity, the vibrant wildflowers of their secret glades seeming to mock her with their innocent beauty. The immediate question that clawed at Elara's consciousness was one of trust. In this treacherous landscape of royal intrigue, where ambition reigned supreme and loyalty seemed a fluid commodity, to whom could she possibly turn? The very individuals who had offered their seemingly heartfelt congratulations at her wedding were likely complicit in Theron's scheme, their smiles now appearing as masks concealing their true intentions. The powerful lords and ladies of the court, with their intricate network of alliances and rivalries, were all potential players in this dangerous game, their motivations shrouded in layers of political expediency. Even the seemingly innocuous interactions she had observed took on a sinister new light. The solicitous inquiries about her well-being from the Queen Mother, whose eyes held a disconcerting mixture of pity and something Elara couldn't quite decipher. The overly friendly overtures from Lady Beatrice, a prominent figure known for her sharp wit and even sharper ambition, whose smiles never quite reached her cold, assessing gaze. Every interaction now felt like a carefully choreographed dance, each word and gesture potentially carrying a hidden meaning, a veiled threat. The servants, who moved silently through the castle corridors, their faces often impassive and unreadable, were another unknown quantity. Some had served the royal family for generations, their loyalties deeply entrenched. Others were newer to the court, their allegiances less certain. Could any of them be trusted to carry a secret, to offer assistance without fear of reprisal? The very air in Ethelgard seemed to hum with unspoken loyalties and hidden allegiances, creating an invisible web that Elara felt hopelessly entangled within. Driven by a desperate need for information, Elara began to subtly probe the court, her own demeanor shifting from naive compliance to one of quiet observation. She listened intently to the snippets of conversations that drifted through the halls, her mind piecing together fragments of information, searching for any clue that might illuminate the full extent of Theron's conspiracy and the identities of those involved. She asked seemingly innocuous questions, feigning ignorance while carefully watching the reactions of those she questioned, searching for the telltale flicker in their eyes, the slight hesitation in their responses. It was a dangerous game she was playing, navigating the treacherous currents of the court with no map and no allies. One wrong word, one misplaced trust, could expose her newfound knowledge and place her in even greater peril. The weight of the secret she now carried pressed down on her, a suffocating burden that threatened to crush her spirit. One evening, while attending a small gathering in the Queen Mother's private chambers, Elara overheard a hushed exchange between the Queen Mother and Lord Valerius. They spoke of the king's declining health in grave tones, their words laced with an urgency that sent a shiver of foreboding down Elara's spine. Then, Valerius mentioned Theron's impatience and the need to ensure a smooth transition. The Queen Mother's response, a sharp, almost warning glance, spoke volumes of the delicate and dangerous situation. Later, feigning a headache, Elara retreated to her chambers, her mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, painting a grim picture of ambition and ruthless calculation. Theron was clearly eager to ascend the throne, and Lord Valerius, with the Queen Mother's apparent approval, was instrumental in facilitating this transition. And Elara, the unsuspecting bride, was merely a pawn in their power play. The question remained, what was the specific nature of the arrangement that had brought her to Ethelgard? Was she simply a distraction, a means to present an image of stability while Theron and his allies solidified their plans? Or was her role in their conspiracy more significant, more dangerous? The thought that she might be a mere obstacle to be removed once Theron achieved his ambition sent a wave of icy fear through her. As the night deepened, Elara found herself staring out of the towering window of her chambers, the moon casting long, skeletal shadows across the castle courtyard. The whispers of the court seemed to echo in the silence, no longer just curious murmurs, but now sounding like the ominous rustling of unseen forces. She was alone, trapped within the cold grandeur of Ethelgard, surrounded by potential enemies. The castle's walls, which should have offered sanctuary, now felt like the bars of a prison, their ancient stones holding captive not just her body, but her very hope. But amidst the fear and the isolation, a spark of defiance began to flicker within Elara. The innocent girl from the valley might have been easily manipulated, but the woman who now possessed the knowledge of a royal conspiracy was beginning to find a strength she never knew she had. The whispers in the castle had revealed their true, sinister nature, and Elara knew that she could not afford to remain a passive victim. She had to find someone she could trust, someone who might be willing to help her navigate this treacherous landscape and uncover the full extent of Theron's deceit. The castle's walls might have ears, but Elara was beginning to learn how to listen, and how to play her own hand in this deadly game. The dawn of deceit had broken, and for Elara, the fight for her survival, and perhaps even her revenge, had just begun. Story 6. Shadows of the Past in the Cold Great Hall. The weight of the conspiracy pressed down on Elara, a suffocating burden that threatened to steal her breath in the very air she inhaled within the imposing walls of Ethelgard. Sleep offered little respite, her dreams haunted by fleeting images of Theron's predatory smile and the Queen Mother's veiled warnings. The grand halls, once symbols of power and majesty, now seemed to Elara like echoing tombs, their cold stone surfaces radiating an ancient malevolence, whispering tales of forgotten intrigues and the silent downfalls of those who had dared to stand against the currents of royal ambition. Driven by a desperate need to understand the full scope of the danger she faced, Elara resolved to delve deeper into the castle's hidden histories, hoping to unearth any precedent, any warning from the past that might offer guidance in her perilous present. The royal library, with its towering shelves of ancient tomes, became her refuge, a place where the silent wisdom of ages past offered a temporary solace from the treacherous whispers of the living court. She spent hours poring over dusty chronicles, her fingers tracing the faded script of long-dead scribes. She read of power struggles, of alliances forged and broken, of the ruthless efficiency with which those who stood in the path of ambition were often removed. Tales of queens who had arrived at the castle under similar circumstances, their origins humble, their fates often tragic, sent shivers down her spine. Some had faded into obscurity, their voices silenced by the overwhelming power of the court. Others had met with more untimely ends, their stories whispered in hushed tones, relegated to the darkest corners of castle lore. One particular chronicle, bound in cracked leather and bearing the faded crest of a forgotten royal lineage, detailed the reign of King Alaric the Stern, a monarch known for his ruthlessness in consolidating his power. Within its brittle pages, Elara found a chilling account of his marriage to a woman of common birth, a union orchestrated for purely political reasons to quell unrest among the populace. The chronicle hinted at the queen's growing awareness of her precarious position and her attempts to uncover the secrets of the court, attempts that ultimately led to her mysterious and sudden death. The parallels between that long-ago queen's fate and her own burgeoning suspicions sent a cold wave of fear washing over Elara. The cold great hall, the heart of the castle where grand feasts and royal pronouncements once echoed, now felt to Elara like a stage set for a tragedy yet to unfold. The portraits of past monarchs that lined its walls seemed to gaze down at her with knowing, judgmental eyes, their painted smiles concealing untold stories of ambition and betrayal. The very air seemed heavy with the ghosts of past intrigues, their silent presence a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the veneer of royal splendor. Elara began to pay closer attention to the subtle dynamics within the royal family. The relationship between Theron and his younger brother, Prince Cassian, a man often overlooked in the shadow of the heir apparent, seemed strained, marked by a barely concealed resentment on Cassian's part and a dismissive indifference on Theron's. Cassian, though possessing a sharp intellect and a quiet charm, held no official position of power, his existence seemingly relegated to the periphery of royal affairs. Elara wondered if his resentment might be a vulnerability, a potential crack in the united front of Theron's ambition. The Queen Mother, a formidable woman whose sharp gaze seemed to penetrate all pretense, remained an enigma. Her interactions with Elara were often a confusing mix of polite concern and veiled warnings. Sometimes, her eyes held a flicker of what seemed like genuine sympathy, a silent acknowledgement of Elara's difficult position. At other times, her gaze was cold and assessing, as if she were constantly evaluating Elara's worth, her potential to either aid or hinder Theron's ascent. Elara couldn't decipher her true allegiance. Was she a willing participant in Theron's scheme, or was she merely tolerating it for the sake of the royal line? Driven by a desperate instinct for self-preservation, Elara began to cultivate a carefully constructed facade of naive compliance. She feigned an ignorance of the court's intricate politics, focusing instead on the more superficial aspects of her royal duties: the elaborate gowns, the formal dinners, the seemingly endless rounds of social engagements. She smiled politely, nodded attentively, and offered vague, agreeable responses, hoping to lull the suspicions of those who might perceive her as a threat. But beneath this carefully constructed exterior, Elara's mind was a whirlwind of calculations and observations. She sought out opportunities to engage in seemingly casual conversations with various members of the court, her ears keenly attuned to any stray remark, any unguarded admission that might shed further light on Theron's arrangement. She learned to read the subtle language of the court, the raised eyebrow, the almost imperceptible shake of the head, the pregnant pause before a carefully worded response. One evening, during a small gathering in Lady Beatrice's private salon, a conversation arose about the late king's declining health. Lady Beatrice, known for her sharp tongue and her intimate knowledge of the court's inner workings, remarked with a seemingly casual air, "It was rather sudden, wasn't it? One day he was well enough to take a short ride in the gardens, and the next—" She trailed off, her eyes flicking towards Elara with a knowing glint before she quickly changed the subject. The implication, however, hung heavy in the air. Had the king's death been as natural as the official pronouncements had stated? The shadows of the past in the cold great hall seemed to lengthen and deepen around Elara, whispering warnings of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface of royal life. The faces in the portraits seemed to hold a silent counsel, their painted eyes urging caution. Elara knew that she was walking a treacherous path, surrounded by individuals whose ambitions were as sharp as the blades concealed beneath their elegant attire. Trust was a fragile commodity in this world of power and intrigue, and Elara knew that she had to choose her allies wisely, if she could find any at all. The whispers in the castle were growing louder, their tone more ominous, and Elara felt a growing sense of urgency. The truth behind Theron's deceit was a dangerous secret, and uncovering it might be the only way to save herself from becoming another forgotten tragedy etched into the cold stones of Ethelgard. The dawn of deceit had broken, and Elara was now navigating the treacherous twilight of a royal conspiracy, where the shadows of the past held chilling premonitions for her future. Story 7. Silent Tears on Velvet Gowns. The weight of unspoken truths and the chilling implications of Lady Beatrice's veiled remarks settled upon Elara like a shroud, a constant reminder of the precariousness of her position within the opulent yet treacherous confines of Ethelgard. The vibrant hues of her royal gowns, once symbols of her elevated status, now felt like mere camouflage, concealing the turmoil that churned within her. The elaborate embroidery, the delicate lace, all seemed like superficial adornments, unable to mask the growing sense of isolation and the gnawing fear that had taken root in her heart. Sleep offered little escape from the relentless cycle of suspicion and anxiety. Her nights were often plagued by fitful dreams, fragmented images of Theron's cold smile and the knowing glances of the court swirling together in a disorienting vortex. She would often awaken in a cold sweat, the silence of her vast chambers amplifying the frantic beating of her heart, the opulent surroundings feeling less like a sanctuary and more like a gilded prison. The forced gaiety of courtly life became an unbearable burden. The endless rounds of social engagements, the elaborate banquets filled with forced laughter and empty pleasantries, the seemingly endless parade of rituals and ceremonies, all felt like a cruel charade, a constant performance where she was expected to play the role of the happy, oblivious royal consort. Each polite smile she offered felt like a betrayal of the fear that gnawed at her insides, each gracious nod a silent scream trapped within her throat. She found herself increasingly drawn to the solitude of the castle gardens, a sprawling expanse of manicured lawns, fragrant flower beds, and ancient, moss-covered statues. Here, amidst the silent beauty of nature, she could momentarily shed the suffocating weight of courtly expectations and allow her true emotions to surface. The tears she could not shed in the presence of the court often flowed freely beneath the watchful gaze of the ancient trees, silent testaments to her growing despair. It was during one such solitary sojourn in the rose garden, the air heavy with the intoxicating scent of blooming petals, that Elara encountered Prince Theron. He was seated on a stone bench, a book of poetry open in his lap, his expression one of quiet melancholy. He seemed as much an outsider in the boisterous world of the court as she did, a silent observer on the periphery of royal affairs. Their initial interactions had been brief and formal, marked by a mutual reserve. But in their shared isolation, a tentative understanding began to blossom between them. Theron, often overshadowed by his charismatic and ambitious elder brother, possessed a keen intellect and a quiet sensitivity that Elara found surprisingly comforting. He spoke of literature, of philosophy, of the beauty of the natural world, topics far removed from the petty intrigues and power struggles that dominated courtly conversation. In his company, Elara found a temporary respite from the constant need to maintain a facade. She could speak more freely, though still carefully, hinting at her unease without revealing the full extent of her suspicions. Theron listened with a thoughtful attentiveness, his intelligent eyes often reflecting a deeper understanding than his carefully chosen words conveyed. One afternoon, as they strolled through the secluded pathways of the herb garden, Elara cautiously broached the subject of the late king's illness. She phrased her inquiry as mere curiosity, a desire to understand the history of the royal family. Cassion's response, however, was surprisingly guarded. A shadow flickered across his usually placid features, and his voice dropped to a near whisper as he spoke of the king's sudden decline. His words carefully chosen, yet somehow conveying a sense of unease, a hint that all might not have been as it seemed. His Majesty's passing was swift, Cassion had said, his gaze fixed on a distant statue. One day he was taking his customary stroll through the lower gardens, the next, he was gone. It was a great shock to us all. The emphasis on swift and shock hung in the air between them, a silent question mark that Elara instinctively understood. The encounter with Cassion, though brief and carefully veiled, left Elara with a renewed sense of purpose. He might not be an outright ally, but his subtle unease regarding the late king's death suggested a potential crack in the united front of Theron's ambition. Perhaps, in the shadows of the court, there were others who harbored similar suspicions, others who might be willing to see the truth revealed. Emboldened by this fragile hope, Elara continued her quiet observations, her senses sharpened, her mind constantly piecing together the fragments of information she gleaned from overheard conversations and subtle interactions. She noticed the almost imperceptible tension between Theron and some of the older, more established members of the king's former council, men who seemed to regard the new heir with a mixture of apprehension and veiled disapproval. One such figure was Lord Elmsworth, a man whose long and distinguished service to the crown was well known. He was a man of unwavering integrity, his loyalty to the late king beyond question. Elara had observed several tense exchanges between Elmsworth and Theron, their voices low and strained, their body language conveying a deep-seated disagreement. Could Elmsworth be someone who suspected the truth, someone who might be willing to help her? The thought was a dangerous one, a fragile tendril of hope reaching out in the darkness. Trusting the wrong person could have devastating consequences, potentially exposing her knowledge and placing her directly in harm's way. But the isolation was becoming unbearable, the weight of her secret threatening to crush her. She needed an ally, someone within the castle walls who might see beyond her title and her origins, someone who might be willing to risk everything to uncover the truth. As the silent tears continued to fall in the solitude of the castle gardens, Elara knew that she could not remain a passive observer for much longer. The whispers in the castle were growing louder, the shadows of the past lengthening, and the weight of her own precarious position was becoming increasingly unbearable. She had to find someone she could trust, someone who might help her navigate the treacherous currents of the royal court and expose the darkness that lay at the heart of Theron's ambition. The dawn of deceit had broken, and Elara was now desperately searching for a flicker of light in the encroaching twilight, a single beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness of Ethelgard. Story 8. The truth buried beneath layers of deceit. The subtle unease she had witnessed in Prince Cassion's demeanor, coupled with the palpable tension between Theron and Lord Elmsworth, ignited a fragile spark of hope within Elara's increasingly despairing heart. The possibility that she was not entirely alone in her suspicions, that there might be others within the castle walls who sensed the darkness gathering around the throne, offered a sliver of light in the suffocating gloom of Ethelgard. Driven by this nascent hope, Elara resolved to be more direct, albeit still cautious, in her pursuit of the truth. She sought out opportunities to engage Lord Elmsworth in conversation, her demeanor carefully crafted to appear as innocent curiosity rather than outright suspicion. She spoke of her initial impressions of the court, her bewilderment at some of the unspoken tensions she had sensed, framing her observations as the innocent confusion of someone new to the intricacies of royal life. Lord Elmsworth, a man of imposing stature and a gaze that seemed to pierce through pretense, listened with a grave attentiveness. His responses were measured, his words carefully chosen, yet Elara detected a flicker of something akin to sympathy in his deep-set eyes. He spoke of the weight of tradition, the importance of stability within the kingdom, and the solemn duty of those who served the crown. He offered no direct confirmation of her suspicions, but his very reserve seemed to hint at a deeper unease. One afternoon, during a quiet moment in the castle gardens, Elara found herself alone with Lord Elmsworth near the ancient sundial, its weathered face a silent witness to countless secrets whispered over the centuries. She took a deep breath, steeling her nerves, and asked him, her voice barely above a whisper, about the late king's final days. She spoke of the suddenness of his passing, echoing Lady Beatrice's seemingly casual remark. Lord Elmsworth's gaze turned towards the sundial, his brow furrowed in thought. His Majesty's decline was unexpected, he conceded, the word carrying a weight that belied its simplicity. He had been frail, yes, but his spirit remained strong. His final illness, it progressed with unusual speed. He paused, his gaze shifting back to Elara, a hint of warning in their depths. Such things can happen, of course. The vagaries of the human body are often beyond our understanding. His words were ambiguous, yet Elara sensed a subtle communication beneath the surface. The emphasis on unexpected and unusual speed, coupled with the almost cautionary tone of his final remark, suggested that he, too, harbored doubts about the official account of the king's death. He was not openly confirming her suspicions, but he was also not entirely dismissing them. The encounter with Lord Elmsworth left Elara with a renewed sense of cautious optimism. He might not yet be an ally, but he was clearly not entirely convinced by the narrative that Theron and his supporters were presenting. Perhaps, with careful cultivation, she could find a way to earn his trust and uncover the truth together. In the meantime, Elara continued her subtle investigation, her eyes and ears constantly alert for any further clues. She paid particular attention to the interactions between Theron and his closest advisors, Lord Valerius chief among them. Their hushed conversations often took place behind closed doors, but Elara occasionally caught snippets of their exchanges, fragments of phrases about securing the transition, handling any complications, and the king's final wishes. These fragments, though cryptic, reinforced Elara's growing conviction that a dark conspiracy lay at the heart of Theron's ascension. One evening, feigning illness to avoid a particularly tedious court function, Elara slipped out of her chambers and made her way to Theron's private study. She knew it was a risky endeavor, one that could have severe consequences if she were discovered, but her desperation for answers outweighed her fear. The study was heavily guarded, but Elara, drawing upon the resourcefulness she had learned in her village, managed to slip past the sentries unnoticed, her movements as silent and fluid as a shadow in the dimly lit corridors. Once inside the study, the air felt heavy with secrets. Parchments covered the large oak desk, sealed with the royal crest. Maps of the kingdom adorned the walls, marked with strategic notations. Elara's heart pounded in her chest as she began to search, her eyes scanning the documents for any incriminating evidence. Beneath a stack of seemingly innocuous reports, she discovered a hidden compartment in the desk. Her fingers trembled as she pried it open, revealing a small, locked box. Frustration washed over her, but then her gaze fell upon a small key lying carelessly beneath a candlestick on the desk. With a surge of adrenaline, she snatched the key and carefully inserted it into the lock. The box sprang open, revealing a collection of letters and a small, intricately carved wooden box. The letters, written in Theron's unmistakable hand, were addressed to Lord Valerius. Their contents were damning. They detailed the meticulous planning of the arrangement, the financial incentives offered to key members of the court, and, most shockingly, a veiled reference to ensuring the king's peace, a chilling euphemism that sent a wave of nausea through Elara. The wooden box contained a small vial of clear liquid and a single, dried herb that Elara, with her knowledge of natural remedies, immediately recognized as a potent and fast-acting poison, one that could easily mimic the symptoms of a natural illness. The truth, buried beneath layers of deceit and carefully constructed lies, now lay bare before Elara, stark and horrifying. Theron had not only used her as a pawn in his political machinations, but he had also orchestrated the murder of his own father to secure his ascent to the throne. And Elara, his unsuspecting wife, was now inextricably linked to his crime, her very existence a potential threat to his carefully constructed reign. The whispers in the castle no longer sounded like distant murmurs. They now echoed in Elara's mind as a deafening roar of betrayal and danger. She was married to a murderer, surrounded by conspirators, and her own life hung precariously in the balance. The dawn of deceit had fully broken, casting a harsh and unforgiving light on the darkness that had taken root in the heart of Ethelgard. Elara knew that she could no longer afford to remain in the shadows. The truth was a dangerous weapon, and she had just unearthed its sharpest edge. The time for silent tears was over. The time for action had begun. Story 9. The Price of a False Crown. The contents of the locked box in Theron's study felt like a physical weight in Elara's hands, the letters and the vial of poison a damning testament to the depths of his depravity. The realization that she was not merely a pawn in a political game, but the wife of a regicide, sent a cold wave of nausea through her. The crown he so desperately sought was stained with the blood of his own father, and her life was now inextricably intertwined with this horrific secret. The immediate instinct was to flee, to escape the suffocating confines of Ethelgard and the presence of the man who had so callously deceived her. But Elara knew that escape would be a perilous endeavor, fraught with danger. She was a virtual prisoner within the castle walls, surrounded by Theron's loyal guards and the watchful eyes of his co-conspirators. Any attempt to flee would likely be swift and fatal. Moreover, a sudden departure would only confirm any suspicions Theron might have about her growing unease. It would raise questions, trigger investigations, and potentially expose the truth she now carried like a burning ember. Elara knew she had to be strategic, to bide her time, and to carefully consider her next move. The knowledge she now possessed was a dangerous weapon, but wielding it carelessly could lead to her own destruction. She needed to find a way to expose Theron's treachery without incriminating herself, to bring the truth to light in a way that would protect her and dismantle his carefully constructed reign. Her thoughts turned to Prince Cassian. His subtle unease regarding the late king's death, his quiet intelligence, and his seemingly marginalized position within the court made him a potential, albeit risky, ally. He had no apparent stake in Theron's ascension, and his resentment towards his elder brother might make him receptive to the truth. The risk, however, was significant. If Cassian were loyal to Theron, or if he were simply unwilling to become embroiled in such a dangerous conspiracy, revealing her knowledge could place Elara in even greater jeopardy. Yet, the isolation of keeping such a monumental secret was becoming unbearable. She needed someone to share the burden, someone who might offer guidance and support. Elara resolved to approach Cassian with caution, testing the waters before revealing the full extent of her discovery. She sought him out in the relative privacy of the castle gardens, their previous conversations providing a fragile foundation for a more delicate exchange. "Prince Cassian," she began, her voice carefully neutral, "I have been troubled by the circumstances surrounding the late king's passing." She watched his reaction closely, noting the subtle tightening of his jaw, the flicker of apprehension in his eyes. Cassian's response was measured. "It was a sad and sudden loss for the kingdom, Your Grace," he replied, his tone formal, yet lacking the overt grief that had been publicly displayed by others in the court. Elara pressed on, her voice barely above a whisper. "Indeed." And yet, there were whispers, even then, of its unexpected nature. She deliberately used the same word Lord Elmsworth had employed, hoping to gauge Cassian's reaction. A shadow crossed Cassian's features, and he hesitated for a moment before speaking. "The workings of illness can be mysterious, Your Grace. Grief can often lead to unfounded speculation." His words were carefully chosen, neither confirming nor denying her implication. Elara sensed his caution, but also a flicker of something beneath the surface, a hint of shared doubt. She decided to take a small risk. "Perhaps," she said softly, her gaze meeting his directly, "but sometimes the truth lies buried beneath layers of arrangement." She deliberately used the same ambiguous word from the overheard conversation that had first sparked her suspicions. Cassion's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition passing through them. He looked around the secluded garden, ensuring they were not overheard, before responding in a low voice. "Arrangement, Your Grace? That is an interesting choice of words." The subtle shift in his demeanor, the guarded curiosity in his tone, gave Elara a sliver of hope. He was not dismissing her outright. Perhaps, just perhaps, he suspected something as well. Over the next few days, Elara continued to cultivate her conversations with Cassion, carefully dropping veiled hints, testing his reactions, and gradually revealing more of her unease. She spoke of the inconsistencies she had observed, the hushed conversations, the knowing glances. Cassion listened intently, his initial reserve slowly giving way to a cautious interest. Finally, driven by desperation and a growing sense of urgency, Elara decided to reveal a portion of what she had discovered, omitting the most damning evidence of Theron's direct involvement in the king's death, but focusing instead on the political machinations and the suspicious financial transactions she had found in the ledger. Cassion's reaction was one of stunned disbelief, followed by a chilling realization. The pieces of the puzzle seemed to click into place for him as well, confirming his own long-held unease about his brother's sudden rise to power and the circumstances surrounding their father's demise. I had my suspicions," Cassion confessed, his voice barely a whisper, his face pale. "Theron's ambition. It always burned so fiercely. But to think," he trailed off, unable to voice the full horror of the implication. With Cassion now a reluctant confidant, Elara knew she had taken a significant risk, but also gained a potential ally. He was hesitant, fearful of the consequences of confronting his powerful elder brother, but the truth, once revealed, had taken root in his mind. Together, they began to cautiously explore the whispers within the court, seeking out others who might harbor doubts or possess crucial pieces of information. They moved like shadows in the castle corridors, their hushed conversations taking place in secluded alcoves and forgotten corners, the weight of their shared secret binding them together in a fragile alliance. The price of Theron's false crown was becoming increasingly clear. It was built upon a foundation of lies, conspiracy, and murder. And Elara, the unsuspecting bride, now found herself caught in the deadly fallout, her life hanging precariously in the balance as she and her unlikely ally sought to expose the darkness that had taken root in the heart of Ethelgard. The whispers in the castle were no longer just ominous murmurs. They were the hushed pronouncements of a truth waiting to be unleashed, a truth that threatened to shatter the fragile peace of the kingdom and bring Theron's bloody reign crashing down. The dawn of deceit had broken, and the fight for justice and for Elara's survival had entered a dangerous new phase. Story 10. The Curse of the Dispossessed. The fragile alliance forged in hushed whispers between Elara and Prince Cassion became a lifeline in the treacherous currents of Castle Ethelgard. Bound by the shared knowledge of Theron's dark secret, they moved with a new frown, their every interaction veiled in an air of casual indifference for the prying eyes of the court. The weight of their discovery, the poison and the incriminating letters, was a heavy burden, a secret they carried like a precious, volatile gem that could shatter their fragile world if exposed prematurely. Their clandestine meetings continued in the shadowed corners of the castle, the ancient library and the secluded reaches of the gardens becoming their sanctuaries. Cassion, initially hesitant and fearful of the repercussions, gradually found a quiet resolve hardening within him. The injustice of his father's murder, the blatant ambition that had driven his elder brother to such a heinous act, began to outweigh his fear. He saw in Elara not just the unwitting victim of Theron's deceit, but a woman of quiet strength and unwavering determination. Together, they began to delve deeper into the whispers of the court, their senses acutely attuned to any murmur of dissent, any hint of unease regarding Theron's sudden ascension. They sought out individuals who had served the late king with unwavering loyalty, those who might have observed inconsistencies or harbored their own suspicions. Lord Elmsworth remained a key focus of their attention. His earlier guarded remarks and his palpable tension with Theron suggested a man wrestling with his own doubts. Elara, emboldened by Cassion's cautious support, resolved to approach him again, this time with a slightly more direct, yet still carefully veiled, inquiry. She found him in the castle's armory, amidst the gleaming steel and the silent stories of past battles. The air was thick with the scent of oil and aged leather, a stark contrast to the perfumed atmosphere of the royal salons. "Lord Elmsworth," Elara began, her voice low and respectful, "I have been studying the portraits in the Great Hall. King Alaric the Stern. His reign was marked by certain consolidations of power, was it not?" Elmsworth turned, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Indeed, Your Grace. King Alaric was a man who understood the necessity of a strong and unified kingdom. He dealt decisively with any perceived threats to the stability of the realm." Elara nodded slowly. "And history often judges such actions, with varying degrees of favor, I imagine." A flicker of understanding crossed Elmsworth's features. "History," he replied, his voice grave, "has a way of unearthing even the most carefully buried truths, Your Grace. Sometimes, the methods employed to achieve stability cast long shadows." The exchange was subtle, yet Elara felt a significant shift in Elmsworth's demeanor. He was no longer simply offering guarded remarks. He seemed to be acknowledging the darker undercurrents of royal history, perhaps even hinting at parallels with the present situation. Emboldened, Cassion joined their conversation, his tone carefully neutral. "Lord Elmsworth, you served my father with unwavering loyalty for many years. You knew his character well. Did you perceive any significant changes in his health in the weeks leading up to his passing?" Elmsworth's gaze turned to Cassion, a deep sadness reflected in his eyes. He hesitated for a long moment before speaking, his voice barely above a whisper. "His Majesty, he had his frailties, Prince Cassion, as is the way of men of his age. But his spirit remained strong, his mind sharp. The swiftness of his decline, it troubled me." The unspoken words hung heavy in the air, a shared acknowledgment of the inconsistencies surrounding the late king's death. Elara and Cassion exchanged a silent glance, a fragile bond of shared suspicion solidifying between them and the respected lord. Over the following days, the unlikely trio continued their discreet inquiries, their network of cautious confidants slowly expanding. They discovered a few loyal servants who had observed Theron's increasingly strained interactions with his father in the weeks before his death, subtle hints of impatience and barely concealed resentment. They also unearthed whispers of a trusted royal physician who had been abruptly dismissed shortly before the king's final illness, his replacement a newcomer to the court with close ties to Lord Valerius. Each small piece of information, each hushed anecdote, added to the growing weight of evidence against Theron. The arrangement was no longer just a political maneuver, it was a carefully orchestrated plan that culminated in a father's murder. As their investigation deepened, Elara and Cassion became increasingly aware of the danger they were in. Theron, now secure on the throne, exuded an air of ruthless authority. His inner circle, emboldened by their success, watched the court with an almost arrogant confidence. Any hint of dissent, any whisper of suspicion, would be swiftly and brutally crushed. One evening, a chilling incident served as a stark reminder of the stakes. A minor courtier, known for his loyalty to the late king and his occasional, unguarded remarks about the swiftness of his demise, was found dead in his chambers. The official explanation was a sudden illness, but the unnatural pallor of his skin and the faint, bitter almond scent that lingered in the air sent a wave of icy fear through Elara and Cashin. Theron was not merely a schemer. He was a killer who would stop at nothing to protect his crown. The curse of the dispossessed, the silent screams of those who had fallen victim to royal ambition, seemed to echo through the ancient halls of Ethelgard. Elara, once an innocent bystander, was now caught in its deadly embrace. But the fear that had initially gripped her was slowly being replaced by a steely resolve. She would not allow Theron to silence the truth, to stain the legacy of his father with his blood. With Cashin and a small, trusted circle by her side, she was ready to risk everything to expose the darkness that had taken root in the heart of the kingdom. The whispers in the castle were about to become a roar. The dawn of deceit had broken, and the fight for justice, for the memory of the fallen king, and for Elara's very survival, was about to reach its perilous climax. Story 11. The embers of hatred begin to glow. The sudden and unsettling death of the minor courtier, a man whose only transgression seemed to be a lingering loyalty to the late king and a few ill-advised whispers, sent a chilling wave of fear and a burning surge of anger through Elara and Cashin. The blatant disregard for life, the swift and brutal silencing of any potential dissent, served as a stark and terrifying reminder of the absolute power Theron now wielded and the ruthlessness he was willing to employ to maintain his grip on the stolen crown. The almond scent, faint yet unmistakable, lingered in their minds, a ghostly whisper of the poison Elara had discovered in Theron's hidden box. It was a chilling confirmation of their darkest fears, a tangible link between Theron and the suspicious death of his own father, now tragically echoed in the fate of a man who had simply voiced his doubts. The fragile hope that had begun to blossom within Elara's heart threatened to wither under the icy winds of fear. The walls of Ethelgard, once seemingly impenetrable bastions of royal authority, now felt like the confines of a tomb, trapping her in close proximity to a man capable of such cold-blooded cruelty. The vibrant tapestries, the glittering chandeliers, the very symbols of royal power now seemed tainted, stained by the blood of the innocent and the insidious stench of deceit. Yet, amidst the fear, a different emotion began to stir within Elara, a slow-burning ember of hatred that threatened to ignite into a consuming fire. The injustice of Theron's actions, the callous disregard for the lives he had so easily extinguished, fueled a growing resolve within her. She would not allow his tyranny to prevail. She would not let the memory of the late king, and the life of the unfortunate courtier, be erased by Theron's bloody ambition. Cashin, too, was deeply affected by the courtier's demise. The casual brutality of his brother's actions seemed to finally shatter the remaining vestiges of familial loyalty. The resentment he had long harbored now curdled into a cold, hard anger. He recognized the inherent danger they were all in, living under the rule of a man who saw dissent as a threat to be eliminated, not a concern to be addressed. The need for secrecy became paramount. Their clandestine meetings grew more infrequent, their communications more coded and circumspect. The small circle of trusted individuals they had cautiously begun to confide in now felt even smaller, the risk of exposure magnified tenfold. Lord Elmsworth, his face etched with a grim understanding of the escalating danger, became an even more crucial ally. His long years of service had provided him with a network of loyal individuals within the castle staff, discreet servants and guards who had served the late king with unwavering devotion and who now viewed Theron's reign with suspicion and unease. These individuals, operating in the shadows of the castle, became their eyes and ears, providing snippets of information, observing Theron's movements and the activities of his inner circle. Through these discreet channels, Elara and Cashin learned of Theron's increasing paranoia, his growing reliance on Lord Valerius and a cadre of ruthless guards who owed their allegiance solely to him. They heard whispers of secret meetings held late into the night, hushed discussions about consolidating power and silencing any remaining pockets of loyalty to the late king. The vial of poison Elara had discovered remained a potent piece of evidence, but presenting it directly would be fraught with peril. Theron would undoubtedly deny its significance and likely turn the accusation against her. They needed a more strategic approach, a way to expose his treachery that would be undeniable and would rally support against him. Their thoughts turned to the upcoming royal commemoration for the late king, a carefully orchestrated event designed to legitimize Theron's reign and project an image of unity and continuity. It was to be a grand spectacle, attended by nobles from across the kingdom and representatives from neighboring realms. Elara and Cassian realized that this event presented a unique opportunity, a public stage upon which the truth could potentially be revealed. The risk was immense. If their plan failed, the consequences would be catastrophic, likely resulting in their swift and brutal execution. But the burning embers of hatred for Theron's injustice, coupled with a desperate hope for a return to a just and honorable rule, fueled their determination. They began to formulate a daring plan, a gamble that would require meticulous planning, unwavering courage, and the trust of their small circle of allies. Cassian, drawing upon his knowledge of the castle's hidden passages and secret chambers, devised a strategy for gathering further evidence and potentially presenting it at the commemoration. Elara, using her position as the queen consort, began to subtly observe Theron and his inner circle, searching for any weakness, any vulnerability they could exploit. The air within Ethelgard grew thick with anticipation for the upcoming commemoration, a deceptive veneer of solemn respect masking the underlying tensions and the simmering resentment that brewed beneath the surface. Elara moved through the court like a phantom, her outward demeanor one of quiet grief, while her mind raced, plotting and strategizing. The embers of hatred for Theron's deceit had begun to glow, fueled by the injustice and the fear. Elara and Cassian knew they were walking a perilous path, but the alternative, living under the tyrannical rule of a regicide, was unthinkable. The whispers in the castle were about to reach a fever pitch, and the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of the kingdom and the lives of all those caught within Theron's web of deceit. The dawn of deceit had broken, and the flames of rebellion were beginning to flicker in the darkness of Ethelgard. Story 12. The Shadowed Path Leading to the Abyss. The upcoming royal commemoration for the late king hung over Castle Ethelgard like a pall, a carefully constructed facade of mourning that barely concealed the simmering tensions and the dangerous undercurrents of suspicion that now permeated the court. For Elara and Cassian, it represented not just a somber remembrance, but a perilous opportunity, a narrow precipice from which they might either expose Theron's treachery or fall into the abyss of his wrath. Their clandestine preparations intensified, each hushed conversation, each furtive exchange carrying the weight of their potential doom. Cassian, utilizing his intimate knowledge of the castle's labyrinthine passages and forgotten chambers, meticulously planned their strategy for the commemoration. He identified hidden routes that would allow them to move unseen, secure locations for stashing any further evidence they might uncover, and potential vantage points from which they could make their desperate gamble. Elara, leveraging her position as the queen consort, embarked on a delicate dance of observation and subtle manipulation. She spent countless hours in Theron's presence, her outward demeanor one of quiet sorrow and wifely support, while her inner gaze remained sharp and calculating. She studied his interactions with his inner circle, particularly Lord Valerius and the ruthless captain of his personal guard, searching for any sign of weakness, any hint of discord that they might exploit. She noticed Theron's increasing reliance on Valerius, his almost constant consultation on matters of state, a dependence that suggested a deep-seated insecurity beneath his veneer of absolute authority. She also observed the unwavering loyalty of Captain Marius, the head of the guard, a man whose eyes held a cold, unwavering devotion to Theron, a formidable obstacle to any direct confrontation. Through their network of discreet allies, Elara and Cassian learned of a secret meeting Theron was planning with several key nobles on the eve of the commemoration, a gathering ostensibly to finalize the arrangements for the ceremony, but which they suspected held a more sinister purpose, perhaps to solidify their allegiance and ensure their silence regarding the king's death. Obtaining access to this meeting became a crucial objective in their plan. Cashin, with the help of a loyal former servant of the late king who now worked in the castle's kitchens, managed to secure a hidden passage that led directly behind the tapestry in the small antechamber adjoining Theron's meeting room. It was a risky maneuver, but it offered the only viable opportunity to overhear Theron's private discussions without raising suspicion. The eve of the commemoration arrived, the castle draped in black velvet and somber hues, the air thick with a palpable sense of foreboding. Elara played her part flawlessly, her outward grief a convincing mask for the storm of anxiety and determination that raged within her. She offered Theron a comforting presence, her touch light and seemingly supportive, all the while acutely aware of the darkness that resided within him. As Theron prepared for his secret meeting, Elara made her own preparations, her heart pounding in her chest. Under the guise of retiring for the evening, she slipped away from her chambers and met Cashin in the shadowed recesses of the castle library. Together, they made their way through the hidden passages, their footsteps silent on the cold stone floors, the fate of the kingdom resting on their clandestine endeavor. They reached the antechamber just as Theron and his select group of nobles began to gather in the adjoining room. Peering through a small gap in the tapestry, Elara and Cashin listened intently as Theron addressed his assembled allies. His words, spoken in a low, conspiratorial tone, confirmed their worst fears. He spoke not just of the commemoration, but of the need to present a united front, to quash any lingering doubts about his ascension, and to deal decisively with anyone who might question the official narrative of the late king's death. He mentioned the unfortunate demise of the minor courtier, dismissing it as a regrettable but necessary measure to maintain stability. Then, he turned his attention to the upcoming arrival of foreign dignitaries, hinting at a potential alliance that would further solidify his power. He spoke of the need for absolute loyalty and offered veiled threats to anyone who might waver in their support. As Elara listened to Theron's chilling pronouncements, the full extent of his ruthlessness became horrifyingly clear. He was not just a usurper, he was a tyrant in the making, willing to spill innocent blood to secure his stolen crown. The abyss yawned before the kingdom, and Elara knew that she and Cashin were the only ones standing in its path. Their plan for the commemoration, already fraught with peril, now took on a new urgency. They had to find a way to expose Theron's treachery publicly and unequivocally, to shatter the carefully constructed illusion of his legitimacy before he could consolidate his power further and plunge the kingdom into darkness. As the secret meeting concluded and the nobles began to disperse, Elara and Cashin retreated back through the hidden passages, their minds racing, the weight of their responsibility pressing down on them. The shadowed path they had chosen was fraught with danger, leading directly to the abyss of Theron's potential retribution. But the embers of hatred had now ignited into a burning resolve. They would not allow darkness to prevail. The whispers in the castle were about to erupt into a storm. The dawn of deceit had broken, and the fight for the soul of Eldoria was about to reach its most perilous hour. Story 13. Blood and Roses on the Cold Stone Floor. The eve of the royal commemoration was a night thick with unspoken anxieties and the heavy scent of funereal lilies that adorned every corner of Castle Ethelgard. For Elara and Cashin, sleep was a distant luxury, their minds racing with the intricate details of their perilous plan. The overheard pronouncements from Theron's secret meeting had solidified their resolve, confirming the depths of his treachery and the urgent need for decisive action. The abyss loomed, and they were the only fragile barrier against its encroaching darkness. Their strategy for the following day was audacious, a desperate gamble that hinged on meticulous timing and the unwavering loyalty of their small circle of allies. Cashin, with the assistance of the trusted kitchen servant and a handful of discreet guards loyal to the memory of the late king, had arranged for Elara to have access to a hidden alcove overlooking the great hall, the very heart of the commemoration ceremony. From this concealed vantage point, she would have a clear view of the proceedings and a crucial moment to act. The plan involved presenting the damning evidence, Theron's letters and the vial of poison, At the precise moment when Theron was delivering his eulogy for his father, a carefully crafted speech intended to solidify his legitimacy and quell any lingering doubts. The shock of the revelation, the public exposure of his guilt, was their only hope of swaying the assembled nobles and foreign dignitaries. The risk was staggering. If Theron detected their plan, or if their allies faltered, the consequences would be swift and brutal. Their lives, and the lives of those who dared to help them, would be forfeit. Yet, the image of the murdered courtier, the chilling echo of the almond scent, fueled their determination. Justice for the fallen king, and the hope of a kingdom free from Theron's tyranny, was worth the ultimate sacrifice. As dawn broke over Ethelgard, casting long, somber shadows across the courtyard, Elara went through the motions of preparing for the commemoration. Her outward demeanor was one of quiet sorrow, her face pale and composed, masking the storm of fear and resolve that raged within her. She donned the black velvet gown prescribed for mourning, its heavy fabric feeling like a physical manifestation of the burden she carried. In the shadowed recesses of a side chapel, she met briefly with Cashen and Lord Elmsworth. Their exchange was brief, a silent confirmation of their roles and a shared look of grim determination. Elmsworth, his face etched with a profound sadness and a steely resolve, assured Elara that his loyal men were positioned strategically throughout the great hall, ready to act if necessary. Cashen, his usual quiet demeanor replaced by a focused intensity, offered Elara a small, intricately carved wooden box, a duplicate of the one she had found in Theron's study, containing a similar vial of harmless liquid and dried herbs, a visual aid for her dramatic reveal. As the bells of Ethelgard began to toll, their mournful peals echoing across the silent courtyard, Elara made her way to the great hall, her heart pounding in unison with the solemn rhythm. The hall was a sea of black, the assembled nobles and dignitaries a silent, expectant audience. Theron stood upon the raised dais, his expression a carefully crafted mask of grief and solemnity. Elara took her place beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her touch betraying none of the loathing that churned within her. As Theron began his eulogy, his voice resonating through the hushed hall, Elara felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment. Following Cashen's prearranged signal, a subtle shift in the position of one of the royal banners, Elara excused herself, feigning a moment of overwhelming grief. She moved with deliberate slowness towards the hidden alcove, her every step feeling like an eternity. Reaching her concealed vantage point, she had a clear view of the unfolding scene below. Theron's voice continued, his words a carefully constructed tapestry of filial piety and self-serving pronouncements. The assembled nobles listened with varying degrees of attentiveness, some genuinely moved by the solemn occasion, others with a cynical detachment. As Theron reached the crescendo of his speech, his voice thick with feigned emotion, Elara took a deep breath and stepped forward, revealing herself to the stunned audience below. A collective gasp rippled through the great hall. "My lords, ladies, esteemed guests," Elara's voice, though trembling slightly, carried through the sudden silence. "I cannot stand here and allow these lies to be spoken in honor of a good man, a king who was betrayed." All eyes turned to her, Theron's carefully crafted composure shattering into a mask of fury and disbelief. "Elara, what madness is this?" he roared, his voice echoing through the hall. Ignoring him, Elara held aloft the wooden box. "This box," she declared, her voice gaining strength, "I found hidden in my husband's chambers. It contains a means to ensure a swift and peaceful passing." She then produced the vial, its clear liquid glinting ominously in the candlelight. A murmur of shock and disbelief rippled through the assembled nobles. Theron's face was now a mask of rage, his eyes burning with a murderous intent. "She lies. This is a fabrication, a desperate attempt to what, I do not know." At that moment, as prearranged, Cashen stepped forward from the crowd, his face pale but resolute. "She speaks the truth, my lords. I too have seen evidence of my brother's ambition." He then produced several of Theron's incriminating letters, their royal seal undeniable. The great hall erupted in chaos. Whispers turned to shouts, disbelief warred with dawning realization. Lord Elmsworth and his loyal guards moved swiftly through the crowd, their presence a silent assertion of authority. Theron, realizing his carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, lunged towards Elara, his eyes filled with a primal fury. But before he could reach her, Cassian stepped forward, drawing his sword. The steel flashed in the candlelight, the sound echoing through the stunned silence that had momentarily fallen over the hall. "Enough, brother," Cassian declared, his voice ringing with a newfound authority. "The truth has been revealed. Your reign, built on blood and lies, ends here." A tense standoff ensued, the assembled nobles watching with bated breath as the two brothers faced each other, the fate of the kingdom hanging in the balance. The scent of lilies, so prevalent moments before, now seemed to mingle with the metallic tang of fear and the unspoken promise of violence. Blood and roses, beauty and death, truth and deceit, all converged on the cold stone floor of the great hall, marking the dawn of a new and uncertain era for Eldoria. The whispers in the castle had finally become a roar, and the price of Theron's false crown was about to be paid in full. Story 14. A Cry from the Darkest Dungeon. The clash of steel echoed through the stunned silence of the great hall, the sharp, ringing sound momentarily eclipsing the chaotic murmur of disbelief and dawning realization that had erupted among the assembled nobles and dignitaries. Prince Cassian's drawn sword, its polished surface reflecting the flickering candlelight, served as a stark visual declaration of the fractured loyalties within the royal family and the undeniable gravity of Elara's accusations. Theron, his face contorted in a mask of incandescent rage and utter disbelief, froze mid-lunge, his eyes burning with a primal fury directed at both Elara and his younger brother. The carefully constructed facade of regal composure had shattered completely, revealing the raw, unrestrained ambition and the inherent violence that lay beneath. For a fleeting moment, the fate of the kingdom hung precariously in the balance, suspended between the shocking revelations and the potential for open bloodshed within the very heart of Ethelgard. Lord Elmsworth and his loyal guards, their movements swift and decisive, began to strategically position themselves throughout the great hall, their presence a silent but potent assertion of authority, a clear indication that the old guard of Eldoria, those whose loyalty lay with the memory of the late king and the stability of the realm, were prepared to intervene. The foreign dignitaries, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid fascination, watched the unfolding drama with bated breath, the carefully orchestrated solemnity of the commemoration dissolving into a scene of unprecedented royal crisis. "Cassian, what treachery is this?" Theron roared, his voice echoing through the hall, laced with a venomous disbelief that his own brother would turn against him. "Put down your weapon, you fool! Do you believe the lies of this peasant?" His gaze flickered towards Elara, his eyes promising retribution for her public defiance. Cassian stood his ground, his sword unwavering. "The peasant, as you so disdainfully call her, speaks the truth, Theron. Your ambition has blinded you, leading you down a path stained with the blood of our father. I will not stand by and allow your tyranny to take root in Eldoria." A murmur of agreement rippled through a segment of the assembled nobles, those who had long harbored their own suspicions about the swiftness of the late king's demise and Theron's subsequent, almost immediate, ascension. Realizing that the tide was beginning to turn against him, that the public exposure of the poison and the incriminating letters had sown seeds of doubt and outrage among the court, Theron's fury shifted to a desperate, cornered animal's cunning. He attempted to rally his own loyalists, his voice regaining a semblance of regal command. "Guards, seize them both. They are attempting to incite rebellion, to destabilize the kingdom." However, the response from the royal guard was hesitant, fractured. Captain Marius, his allegiance firmly with Theron, barked orders, but many of the rank and file, men who had served the late king and held a deep-seated respect for the royal lineage, remained uncertain, their loyalty divided. The seeds of doubt sown by Elara's revelations had taken hold, and they were unwilling to blindly follow Theron's commands without further confirmation. The stalemate held for a tense, heart-stopping moment, the fate of Eldoria hanging in the balance. Then, a voice, thin and weak yet carrying an undeniable authority, echoed from the shadowed entrance of the great hall. What is the meaning of this commotion? All heads turned towards the source of the unexpected interruption. Supported by two visibly shaken guards, his face pale and gaunt, stood the late king, or rather, the man they believed to be dead. A collective gasp of utter shock and disbelief swept through the great hall, eclipsing the previous chaos. The figure was frail, his movements labored, but the unmistakable royal bearing, the piercing blue eyes that had commanded Eldoria for decades, were undeniable. A wave of murmurs, ranging from stunned incomprehension to dawning hope, rippled through the assembled crowd. Elara and Cassian exchanged a look of utter astonishment. Their plan, audacious as it was, had not accounted for this impossible turn of events. Theron, his face a mask of horror and disbelief, stumbled backward, his carefully constructed world collapsing entirely around him. "Father, but you were," he stammered, his voice devoid of its usual commanding resonance, replaced by a bewildered terror. The frail figure of the king raised a trembling hand, his gaze fixed upon Theron with a profound sadness and a deep sense of betrayal. "You believed me dead, Theron? You orchestrated my premature departure from this world." His voice, though weak, held a chilling clarity that cut through the stunned silence. The truth, far more complex and sinister than Elara and Cassian had even imagined, began to unravel. It transpired that the late king had indeed fallen gravely ill, but he had not succumbed to the poison Theron had so carefully administered. A loyal physician, one of those quietly dismissed by Theron, had suspected foul play and, with the help of a few trusted confidants, had managed to administer an antidote, albeit one that left the king in a weakened and incapacitated state. They had kept his survival a closely guarded secret, hoping to gather irrefutable evidence of Theron's treachery before revealing his survival. Elara's public accusation, though unexpected, had forced their hand. As the full weight of his exposed treachery crashed down upon him, Theron's bravado finally crumbled. He made a desperate attempt to flee, to escape the judgment of the court and the wrath of his resurrected father. But the loyal guards, now galvanized by the king's miraculous reappearance and the undeniable evidence of Theron's guilt, moved swiftly to apprehend him. Amidst the renewed chaos and the stunned exclamations of the court, a piercing cry echoed from the depths of the castle, a sound so filled with anguish and despair that it cut through the surrounding noise like a shard of ice. It was a woman's voice, raw with suffering, a desperate plea that seemed to emanate from the very bowels of Ethelgard. Elara and Cassian exchanged a look of bewildered concern. They recognized the voice, a voice they had heard before, faint and muffled, carried on the castle winds. It was the sound of a profound and inconsolable grief, a cry that spoke of unimaginable suffering. As the guards led a defeated and utterly broken Theron away, the king, his frail body trembling, turned a questioning gaze towards Lord Elmsworth. "What was that cry? Who is in such agony within my castle?" Elmsworth's face, which had held a glimmer of relief at the king's reappearance, now clouded with a deep unease. "Your Majesty, there is a prisoner, a woman who has been held in the deepest dungeon for many years. Her existence was kept secret from you." A look of bewildered horror washed over the king's face. "A prisoner? In my dungeons? For years? By whose order?" The answer hung heavy in the air, unspoken yet undeniably directed at the man who had just been led away in chains. The whispers in the castle had always carried tales of darkness and forgotten souls, but neither Elara nor Cashin had ever imagined the existence of such profound and prolonged suffering within its seemingly impenetrable walls. The cry from the darkest dungeon served as a chilling reminder that the truth they had unearthed was perhaps only the tip of a much larger and far more sinister iceberg. The dawn of deceit had broken, but the full extent of the darkness that had enveloped Ethelgard was only beginning to be revealed. Story 15. Packed with the Shadows. The raw, heart-wrenching cry that echoed from the depths of Ethelgard's dungeons hung heavy in the stunned silence of the great hall, a stark counterpoint to the collective gasp of disbelief that had greeted the king's miraculous reappearance. The joyous relief at the exposure of Theron's treachery was instantly tempered by a chilling sense of unease, a stark reminder that beneath the veneer of royal intrigue and political machinations, a deeper, more personal tragedy had been unfolding in the castle's shadowed underbelly. King Alaric, his frail frame trembling with a mixture of shock and dawning horror, fixed a piercing gaze upon Lord Elmsworth, his earlier relief now replaced by a profound disquiet. A prisoner? Hidden for years? By whose decree was such cruelty permitted within my own walls? The question hung in the air, the unspoken answer a damning indictment of the man who had so recently sat beside him, plotting his demise. Elmsworth's face, usually a mask of composed authority, was now etched with a visible discomfort, a reluctance to unveil a secret so deeply buried within the castle's history. "Your Majesty, the matter is delicate. The prisoner, she was confined by order of your late queen, Isolde." A wave of stunned silence washed over the great hall once more. Queen Isolde, King Alaric's beloved wife, a woman remembered for her grace and compassion? The revelation seemed utterly incongruous with her widely held image. Elara and Cashin exchanged bewildered glances, the layers of deceit within Ethelgard seeming to peel back endlessly, revealing ever darker secrets beneath. "Isolde?" the king whispered, his voice laced with disbelief and a profound sorrow. "But why? Who is this woman? What crime could warrant such prolonged and secret confinement?" Elmsworth hesitated, his gaze flickering towards the departing guards who were escorting a defeated Theron away. "Your Majesty, the prisoner is Theron's mother." Another collective gasp rippled through the hall, this revelation even more shocking than the last. Theron's mother, the former Queen Isolde? But she had been presumed dead for over a decade, her passing attributed to a sudden and devastating illness. Elara vividly recalled the hushed whispers surrounding her demise. The court plunged into mourning for the seemingly beloved queen. "But Isolde, she died," King Alaric exclaimed, his voice filled with anguish and confusion. "I mourned her. The entire kingdom mourned her." "That is what we were led to believe, Your Majesty," Elmsworth replied somberly. "But in truth, after Theron's birth, there were complications. Her mental state deteriorated. Upon the advice of the royal physicians at the time, and with what she believed was the Queen's own consent, she was sequestered for her own well-being and that of the royal family." The carefully constructed narrative of Queen Isolde's peaceful passing began to crumble, revealing a darker, more unsettling truth. A woman deemed mentally unstable, hidden away in the castle's deepest dungeons for years, while the world mourned a fabricated death. And Theron, her own son, had allowed this charade to continue, his ambition seemingly outweighing any filial duty or compassion. The cry from the dungeon now took on a horrifying new dimension, no longer just a sound of inconsolable grief, but a desperate lament from a woman abandoned and forgotten, a living testament to the cruelty that could fester within the heart of a royal family. King Alaric, visibly shaken by this devastating revelation, immediately ordered his most trusted guards to descend into the dungeons and bring the prisoner before him. A palpable sense of anticipation and dread filled the great hall as they awaited the arrival of this long-lost queen, this woman shrouded in years of secrecy and suffering. As the guards departed, Cassian turned to Elara, his face pale with shock. His own mother, imprisoned for years? And he allowed us all to believe she was dead? What kind of man, what kind of monster is Theron? Elara could only shake her head, the layers of Theron's deceit seeming endless. The pact he had made with the shadows of ambition had apparently extended to the cruel abandonment of his own mother. The weight was agonizing, the silence in the great hall broken only by the hushed whispers of speculation and disbelief. Finally, the heavy oak doors at the far end of the hall creaked open, and the guards entered, supporting a frail, gaunt figure draped in tattered remnants of what might once have been a royal gown. The woman's face was thin and pale, her eyes wide and haunted, filled with a mixture of confusion and a flicker of long-dormant recognition. As she was slowly led towards the dais, a collective gasp escaped the lips of the assembled nobles. This broken, spectral figure was indeed the woman they remembered as the radiant Queen Isolde, though time and suffering had ravaged her once striking beauty. King Alaric, his eyes filled with a profound sorrow and a dawning sense of guilt, rushed towards her, his voice choked with emotion. "Isolde, my love, is it truly you?" A flicker of recognition sparked in the woman's eyes as she gazed upon the aged king. A weak, trembling hand reached out, her fingers brushing against his. A soft, almost inaudible whisper escaped her lips, a single word that echoed the years of lost love and unimaginable suffering. "Alaric!" The reunion was both heartbreaking and deeply unsettling. The years of isolation and despair had clearly taken their toll on Queen Isolde's mind. She seemed disoriented, her memories fragmented, her grasp on reality tenuous. Yet, in her lucid moments, a profound sadness shone through her haunted eyes, a silent accusation directed at the son who had allowed her to languish in darkness. As King Alaric tenderly embraced his long-lost queen, a heavy silence fell over the great hall. The focus had shifted from Theron's treachery to the profound tragedy of Queen Isolde's hidden suffering. The whispers in the castle had always hinted at darkness, but the reality was far more cruel and heartbreaking than anyone had imagined. The pact with the shadows, it seemed, demanded a terrible price, not just from those who sought power, but from the innocent souls caught in their web. The dawn of deceit had broken, revealing not just a conspiracy for the throne, but a profound and enduring cruelty that had festered in the heart of Ethelgard for years. Story 16. The Bitter Sweetness of Revenge. The reunion between King Alaric and Queen Isolde was a scene of profound and unsettling emotion, a stark tableau of lost time and unimaginable suffering played out before the stunned gaze of the Eldorian court. The years of isolation in the castle's deepest dungeons had left their indelible mark on the once radiant queen. Her mind flickered between moments of lucidity, where a poignant recognition of her beloved Alaric would shine through her haunted eyes, and periods of disorientation, where the present blurred with the painful echoes of her confinement. King Alaric, his own frail health seemingly forgotten in the face of this devastating discovery, cradled Isolde's thin hand in his touch a mixture of tender remorse and a burning fury at the injustice she had endured. The whispers that had always clung to Ethelgard, hinting at forgotten tragedies, now seemed to coalesce around the broken figure of the queen, a silent testament to the darkness that could fester within the heart of a royal lineage. The immediate aftermath of Isolde's reappearance was a whirlwind of activity and hushed discussions. The royal physicians, their reputations now under intense scrutiny, were summoned to attend to the queen's fragile health, their initial diagnosis painting a grim picture of prolonged neglect and mental trauma. King Alaric, his grief and anger intertwined, launched an immediate and thorough investigation into the circumstances of Isolde's confinement, demanding answers and accountability for the years of deceit. The investigation quickly focused on the royal physicians who had advised Isolde's sequestration after Theron's birth. Their testimonies, carefully recorded and scrutinized, revealed a complex web of fear, ambition, and a chilling disregard for the queen's well-being. It became clear that while Isolde had indeed suffered a period of postpartum difficulties, the decision to confine her to the dungeons, a place more befitting criminals than a queen, had been largely influenced by the then-heir, Theron, who had viewed his mother's fragile mental state as a potential threat to his own future claim to the throne. The complications surrounding Isolde's health had been deliberately exaggerated, her condition misrepresented to King Alaric and the court. The narrative of her peaceful passing, so widely accepted for over a decade, was revealed to be a calculated lie, orchestrated by Theron to eliminate any potential obstacle to his ambition and to silence a living witness to his manipulative nature. As the horrifying truth of Theron's cruelty towards his own mother came to light, the remaining vestiges of support for him within the court evaporated. The nobles, initially swayed by his charisma and the seemingly smooth transition of power, now viewed him with disgust and revulsion. The foreign dignitaries, witnesses to the dramatic unraveling of the Eldorian royal family, looked on with a mixture of shock and a newfound respect for Elara's courage in exposing the truth. Theron, now imprisoned in the very dungeons that had held his mother captive for so long, faced the stark reality of his actions. Stripped of his crown and his power, he was left to contemplate the bitter fruits of his ambition, the profound isolation and the utter contempt of those he had sought to rule. For Elara, the revelation of Queen Isolde's plight brought a complex mix of emotions. There was a profound sadness for the years of suffering the queen had endured, a quiet admiration for her resilience, and a chilling understanding of the depths of Theron's depravity. But there was also a flicker of something else, a nascent sense of satisfaction. Not a gleeful triumph, but a quiet acknowledgement that the truth, however painful, had finally been brought to light, and the architect of so much suffering was now facing the consequences of his actions. King Alaric, his focus now entirely on Isolde's recovery and the restoration of justice within his kingdom, turned to Elara and Cashen with a heartfelt gratitude. Their courage and their unwavering pursuit of the truth had saved him from a deadly conspiracy and had exposed the darkness that had festered within his own family. "You have shown remarkable bravery, both of you," the king said, his voice filled with emotion. "You have brought the truth to light at great personal risk. Eldoria owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid." As the immediate crisis subsided, the court began to grapple with the long and arduous process of healing and rebuilding trust. The years of deceit had left deep scars, and the revelation of Queen Isolde's imprisonment had shaken the very foundations of the kingdom's stability. Elara, though now recognized for her courage and her unwavering commitment to justice, found herself in a complex and unfamiliar position. She was no longer just the naive village girl thrust into the heart of royal intrigue, nor simply the victim of Theron's deception. She had become a catalyst for change, a figure of unexpected strength and moral clarity. Yet, the bitterness of Theron's betrayal and the profound sadness of Isolde's suffering left a lingering ache in her heart. Cashen, too, underwent a significant transformation. Stepping out of his brother's shadow and embracing his own sense of justice, he became a trusted advisor to the king, his quiet intelligence and his newfound resolve proving invaluable in navigating the turbulent waters of the court. As for Queen Isolde, her recovery was a slow and arduous process. The years of darkness had taken a heavy toll on her mind, and while moments of clarity returned, the trauma of her confinement remained a deep and enduring wound. Yet, in the gentle care of King Alaric and the growing respect of the court, a fragile hope for healing began to emerge. The sweetness of revenge against Theron, though undeniable in its justness, was tempered by the bitter taste of the suffering that had paved its way. The truth had been revealed, but the scars of deceit ran deep within the heart of Ethelgard. The whispers in the castle had finally fallen silent, replaced by the cautious murmur of a kingdom slowly finding its way back to the light, a kingdom forever changed by the blood and roses that had bloomed on its cold stone floor. The dawn of deceit had broken, and the long, arduous journey towards healing and true justice had only just begun. Story 17. between two worlds, a soul adrift. The immediate aftermath of Theron's downfall and Queen Isolde's miraculous reappearance left Castle Ethelgard in a state of profound upheaval, a kingdom grappling with the raw exposure of its deepest secrets. The joyous relief at the thwarting of a regicide was heavily tempered by the somber reality of the Queen's suffering, a living testament to the cruelty that ambition could breed within the gilded cage of royalty. Queen Isolde's recovery was a delicate and uncertain journey. Her mind, long shrouded in the darkness of her dungeon confinement, flickered like a fragile candle in the wind. Moments of lucidity, where the warmth of recognition for King Alaric and a fleeting awareness of her former life would surface, were often followed by periods of disorientation, where the harsh realities of her imprisonment blurred with the faded memories of happier times. The royal physicians, now acutely aware of the scrutiny of the court and the king's unwavering determination to see justice served, dedicated themselves to her care, their remedies and gentle ministrations offering small glimmers of hope against the vast darkness she had endured. King Alaric, his own health seemingly invigorated by Isolde's return and the expulsion of the venomous presence of his treacherous son, devoted himself entirely to her comfort. He spent hours by her bedside, his voice a soothing balm as he recounted cherished memories of their shared past, patiently piecing together the fragmented remnants of her mind. His love for her, seemingly undimmed by the years of separation and deceit, was a poignant beacon in the otherwise somber atmosphere of the castle. Elara and Cassian, though hailed as heroes for their courage in uncovering Theron's treachery, found themselves navigating a complex new reality within the court. Elara, no longer the naive outsider, was now regarded with a mixture of awe and respect, her quiet strength having played a pivotal role in saving the kingdom from a descent into tyranny. Yet, the weight of the secrets she now carried, the profound sadness of Isolde's suffering, and the lingering bitterness of Theron's betrayal left her with a quiet gravity. Cassian, having shed the shadow of his elder brother, found a newfound purpose in assisting King Alaric in the delicate process of restoring order and trust within the realm. His inherent intelligence and his unwavering commitment to justice proved invaluable as the court grappled with the implications of Theron's actions and the long-hidden tragedy of Queen Isolde. Theron himself languished in the deepest cells of Ethelgard, the very darkness that had held his mother captive now his own grim reality. Stripped of his power and facing the full weight of his crimes, he was left to confront the bitter consequences of his ambition. The whispers that had once surrounded him with the promise of power now echoed with the cold judgment of his actions. However, amidst the immediate concerns of Isolde's health and the repercussions of Theron's treachery, a subtle unease began to permeate the castle once more. It manifested in hushed whispers among the servants, in the nervous glances exchanged by some of the older courtiers, a sense that not all the shadows of Ethelgard had been fully illuminated. Elara, with her heightened sensitivity to the unspoken currents of the court, began to notice these subtle shifts. There was a lingering air of secrecy surrounding Queen Isolde's initial confinement, a reluctance among some of the older staff to speak openly about the early days of her illness and her subsequent sequestration. It was as if a deeper layer of the past remained shrouded in shadow, a truth that had yet to be fully unearthed. One evening, while visiting Queen Isolde in her chambers, Elara witnessed a fleeting moment that sparked a new wave of unease within her. Isolde, in a rare moment of complete lucidity, looked at Elara with a profound sadness in her eyes and whispered a single enigmatic sentence. "He promised me a garden beyond the walls." The words, though seemingly nonsensical, resonated with a strange familiarity within Elara. She had heard similar phrases whispered by some of the castle servants, hushed references to a garden and a promise connected to the queen's initial decline. It was as if Isolde's fractured mind held a key to a deeper secret, a truth that lay hidden beneath the official narrative of her mental instability. Intrigued and increasingly suspicious, Elara confided in Cassian, sharing Isolde's cryptic words and her growing sense that a crucial piece of the puzzle remained missing. Cassian, his own curiosity piqued, agreed to discreetly look into the matter, utilizing his access to the castle archives and his network of trusted informants among the staff. Their inquiries led them down a shadowed path into the castle's past, delving into old medical records, forgotten correspondence, and the fading memories of long-serving staff. They discovered inconsistencies in the initial accounts of Queen Isolde's illness, subtle discrepancies that suggested a deliberate manipulation of the truth. They learned of a mysterious physician, a woman named Elara, a name that sent a shiver of unease through the current Elara, who had briefly attended Queen Isolde after Theron's birth. This physician, highly regarded for her knowledge of both conventional medicine and more unconventional remedies, had seemingly vanished from the court records shortly after Isolde's confinement, her disappearance unexplained. The whispers they unearthed hinted at a deep bond between Queen Isolde and this mysterious physician, a connection that went beyond the typical doctor-patient relationship. Some even suggested a shared interest in esoteric knowledge, in the hidden properties of herbs and the subtle energies of the natural world. As Elara and Cassian pieced together these fragmented clues, a disturbing possibility began to emerge. What if Queen Isolde's confinement had not been solely due to mental instability? What if the garden she spoke of was not a figment of her fractured mind, but a real place, a sanctuary perhaps, connected to this vanished physician? And what if Theron's ambition had extended not just to the throne, but to silencing a truth connected to his mother and this mysterious woman? The cry from the darkest dungeon had been answered, but the whispers of a deeper mystery, a soul seemingly adrift between two worlds of reality and forgotten secrets, began to echo through the ancient stones of Ethelgard once more. The dawn of deceit had broken, but the full landscape of its shadows was only beginning to be revealed, hinting at a pact with forces perhaps even darker than simple ambition. Story 18. The Serpent in the Physic Garden. The enigmatic words whispered by Queen Isolde, "He promised me a garden beyond the walls," clung to Elara's mind like the lingering scent of a rare and exotic bloom. They resonated with an unsettling familiarity, echoing the hushed references to a garden and a promise that she and Cassian had unearthed in their discreet inquiries into the Queen's past. The revelation of the mysterious physician, another woman named Elara, who had seemingly vanished from the court records after Isolde's confinement, only deepened the intrigue. Their continued investigation led them to the castle's oldest archives, a dusty repository of forgotten ledgers, personal correspondence, and faded architectural plans. Amongst these relics of the past, they discovered references to a physic garden located beyond the castle walls, a secluded sanctuary dedicated to the cultivation of medicinal herbs and the study of their properties. The garden, seemingly established by a royal decree centuries ago, had fallen into disuse over time, its existence largely forgotten by the current inhabitants of Ethelgard. Intriguingly, the records indicated a strong connection between Queen Isolde and this physic garden. Royal inventories listed numerous volumes on botany and herbal remedies in her personal library, often annotated in her own elegant script. There were also records of significant expenditures allocated to the garden's upkeep during her time as queen, suggesting a deep personal interest and involvement. The name of the physician Elara also surfaced in connection with the physic garden. Old invoices detailed payments made to her for the procurement of rare and exotic plants, and personal letters between her and Queen Isolde hinted at a shared passion for the healing arts and a deep intellectual bond. The letters spoke of shared experiments, of late-night discussions under the moonlight amidst the fragrant blooms, and of a mutual fascination with the hidden powers of the natural world. As Elara and Cassian pieced together this fragmented history, a disturbing picture began to emerge. What if Queen Isolde's confinement had been a deliberate attempt to sever her connection to this physic garden and the knowledge it held? What if the promise she spoke of was not a delusion, but a genuine agreement, perhaps related to her research or a potential discovery made within the garden's secluded walls? And what role had Theron played in orchestrating her isolation and the disappearance of the physician Elara? Their inquiries took a darker turn when they stumbled upon a heavily redacted section in the journals of one of the royal physicians who had attended Isolde after Theron's birth. The legible fragments hinted at a disagreement regarding the queen's treatment, a concern that her unconventional interests were being deliberately misinterpreted as signs of madness. The name Elara appeared in these redacted passages, often associated with warnings about dangerous knowledge and the need to protect the royal line. The implication was chilling. Could Queen Isolde's confinement have been motivated not by genuine concern for her mental well-being, but by a fear of the knowledge she possessed, knowledge perhaps shared with the physician Elara and connected to the secrets of the Physic Garden? And had Theron, driven by his ruthless ambition, sought to suppress this knowledge, perhaps even orchestrating the disappearance of the physician to ensure its silence? Driven by this unsettling possibility, Elara and Cassian resolved to seek out the forgotten Physic Garden. Following the faded descriptions in the ancient records, they discovered its overgrown remnants nestled in a secluded corner of the royal estate, beyond the immediate castle walls, a place seemingly untouched by the passage of time and the intrigues of the court. The garden was a shadow of its former glory, the once meticulously cultivated beds now choked with weeds, the ornate fountains dry and moss-covered. Yet, amidst the decay, they found traces of its former purpose. The skeletal remains of trellises that had once supported climbing vines, the crumbling stones of what might have been a small laboratory or study, and, most significantly, a few hardy specimens of rare and unusual plants, stubbornly clinging to life amidst the neglect. As they explored the overgrown grounds, Elara, drawing upon her own knowledge of herbs and their properties, recognized several plants that were known for their potent medicinal and even toxic qualities, species not typically found in a common garden. This discovery lent credence to the idea that the Physic Garden had indeed been a place of serious research, a repository of powerful botanical knowledge. In the crumbling remains of the stone structure, they unearthed a hidden compartment containing a collection of dried herbs, carefully labeled in Queen Isolde's elegant script, and a series of coded notes written in a hand they recognized as that of the physician Elara. The notes contained complex botanical formulas and cryptic references to alchemical processes, hinting at a level of knowledge far beyond simple herbal remedies. As Elara and Cassian deciphered the coded notes, a disturbing possibility solidified in their minds. The dangerous knowledge that the court physicians had feared might have involved something far more significant than just herbal cures. Could Queen Isolde and the physician Elara have stumbled upon a secret, a power perhaps connected to the very essence of life and death, a secret that Theron had been desperate to suppress? The serpent of ambition, it seemed, had not only struck at the heart of the royal family but had also slithered into the hidden sanctuary of knowledge, poisoning not just minds but the very potential for profound discovery. The whispers in the castle had hinted at darkness, but the truth buried within the overgrown Physic Garden suggested a pact with shadows far more ancient and far more potent than they had ever imagined. The dawn of deceit had broken, and the path ahead, leading into the tangled mysteries of forgotten knowledge and suppressed power, promised to be even more treacherous than the one they had already traversed. Story 19. The Alchemist's Legacy and the Whispers of Immortality. The coded notes discovered within the crumbling walls of the Physic Garden pulsed with an arcane energy, their cryptic symbols hinting at a level of botanical and alchemical knowledge far surpassing the conventional understanding of the Eldorian court. As Elara, with her innate understanding of herbs, and Cassian, with his scholarly mind, painstakingly deciphered the formulas and allusions, a breathtaking and terrifying possibility began to unfold. The notes detailed intricate processes involving the extraction of essences from rare and exotic plants, often combined with minerals and alchemical reagents. The language was dense with metaphor and symbolism, drawing parallels between the cycles of nature, growth, decay, and regeneration, and the potential for manipulating the very fabric of life. References to the elixir of longevity and the philosopher's stone were not merely abstract concepts. They appeared within the context of specific botanical preparations and experimental procedures. One particularly complex sequence of notes seemed to describe a process for isolating a compound from a luminous, deep-sea algae, a species not native to Eldoria, suggesting extensive trade or expeditions in the past, and combining it with the distilled essence of a rare mountain flower that bloomed only under specific lunar conditions. The resulting concoction, according to the notes, possessed extraordinary regenerative properties, capable of accelerating healing and potentially extending lifespan. Interspersed within these scientific notations were more philosophical musings, written in the distinctive hand of Queen Isolde. She wrote of her fascination with the ephemeral nature of life and her yearning to understand the underlying principles that governed its ebb and flow. Her words spoke of a desire not for mere immortality, but for a deeper comprehension of the life force itself, a quest to unlock the secrets of vitality and resilience. The notes also revealed the close collaboration between Queen Isolde and the physician Elara. Their shared passion had clearly driven them to the very fringes of accepted knowledge, venturing into realms that the more conservative minds of the court would have undoubtedly deemed heretical or dangerous. There were mentions of shared dreams, of intuitive leaps in their research, suggesting a profound intellectual and perhaps even spiritual connection between the two women. However, a darker thread wove its way through the alchemical notations and philosophical musings. Towards the later entries, the tone shifted, becoming more guarded and fearful. There were cryptic allusions to opposition from within the court, to those who viewed their research with suspicion and hostility, fearing the potential disruption of the natural order or perhaps coveting the power that such knowledge might bestow. One particularly chilling entry, written shortly before Queen Isolde's confinement, spoke of a serpent in the garden, a metaphor that Elara and Cassian now understood to likely refer to Theron. Isolde expressed her growing fear of her son's ambition and his increasing interest in their research, hinting that he sought their discoveries for his own selfish ends, devoid of any ethical considerations. The notes ended abruptly, the final entry a hastily scribbled warning. "He knows. The luminescence, protect the heartwood." This cryptic message sent a shiver down Elara's spine. The luminescence likely referred to the deep-sea algae, but the heartwood remained a mystery, perhaps a key ingredient or a symbolic representation of their core discovery. The implications of these findings were staggering. Queen Isolde and the physician Elara had not merely been dabbling in herbal remedies. They had been on the verge of unlocking profound secrets related to life extension and regeneration, a discovery that could have irrevocably altered the course of their world. And Theron, driven by his insatiable lust for power, had likely sought to seize this knowledge for himself, silencing his mother and perhaps even eliminating the physician Elara to ensure his exclusive control. The disappearance of the physician Elara now took on a far more sinister hue. Had she simply vanished, or had Theron orchestrated her demise to safeguard his claim to their discoveries? The lack of any record of her departure from the court suggested the latter, a chilling testament to his ruthlessness. As Elara and Cassian stood amidst the ruins of the Physic Garden, the weight of their discoveries pressing down on them, the whispers of Ethelgard seemed to take on a new resonance. They were no longer just the murmurings of courtly intrigue or forgotten tragedies. They were the echoes of a profound scientific quest, a dangerous pursuit of knowledge that had been violently suppressed. The alchemist's legacy, the potential for manipulating life itself, lay hidden within the coded notes and the overgrown remnants of the Physic Garden. The garden beyond the walls that Queen Isolde had spoken of was not a delusion, but a real place, a sanctuary of forbidden knowledge. And the serpent in that garden, her own son, had struck with deadly precision, silencing the whispers of immortality for his own selfish gain. The path ahead was now clearer, though no less dangerous. Elara and Cassian knew they had to protect the alchemist's legacy, to understand the full extent of Queen Isolde and the physician Elara's discoveries, and to ensure that such profound knowledge did not fall into the wrong hands. The dawn of deceit had broken, revealing not just a conspiracy for the throne, but a hidden history of scientific ambition and ruthless oppression, a pact with shadows that reached far beyond the earthly realm. The whispers of immortality, once confined to dusty tomes and alchemical treatises, now echoed in the very air around them, a siren call to a world teetering on the brink of unimaginable possibilities and terrifying consequences. Story 20. the Heartwood secret and the looming shadow of the Obsidian Order. The alchemist's legacy, unearthed from the overgrown physic garden, pulsed with a silent power, a tantalizing glimpse into the forbidden realms of life extension and regeneration. The coded notes of Queen Isolde and the physician Elara spoke of a profound understanding of the natural world, a knowledge that transcended conventional science and delved into the very essence of vitality. The elixir of longevity was no longer a mythical pursuit but a tangible possibility hinted at within their cryptic formulas. The mention of the Heartwood in Queen Isolde's final, frantic warning, "He knows, the luminescence, protect the Heartwood," became a central focus of Elara and Cassion's investigation. The luminescence, they were increasingly certain, referred to the extraordinary properties of the deep-sea algae. But the Heartwood remained an enigma, a key ingredient or a symbolic representation of their core discovery that Theron had sought to control. Their search led them back to the castle library, this time with a specific focus on Queen Isolde's personal collection. Amongst her annotated botanical texts and alchemical treatises, they discovered a recurring symbol, a stylized depiction of a tree with a radiant heartwood, glowing with an inner light. Beneath the symbol, in Isolde's handwriting, were various cryptic phrases: the wellspring of life, the enduring core, the essence of renewal. Further research revealed that this symbol was associated with an ancient and obscure order known as the Arbor Vitae, or the Tree of Life, a secretive group rumored to possess profound knowledge of the natural world and its hidden energies. Legends whispered of their ability to heal the gravest wounds and extend lifespan through rituals and preparations involving rare plants and the heartwood of ancient trees imbued with unique properties. Intriguingly, there were fragmented historical records suggesting a connection between the Arbor Vitae and the Eldorian royal lineage centuries ago, hinting at a possible patronage or shared pursuit of esoteric knowledge. Could Queen Isolde and the physician Elara have been initiates or beneficiaries of this ancient order's wisdom? Their investigation took another unsettling turn when Cassion unearthed a hidden compartment within the royal archives containing correspondence between Theron and a shadowy organization known as the Obsidian Order. This secretive group, shrouded in rumors of dark magic and the pursuit of forbidden power, had seemingly taken an interest in the research of Queen Isolde and the physician Elara. Theron's letters revealed a pact, a chilling agreement where he offered the Obsidian Order access to his mother's research in exchange for their support in his ascension to the throne and the promise of even greater power. The letters spoke of the luminescence and the heartwood in terms that suggested a desire for control and exploitation, devoid of any understanding of their true significance or ethical implications. The Obsidian Order's interest was particularly disturbing. Legends painted them as practitioners of dark arts, individuals who sought to manipulate life for their own nefarious purposes, twisting natural energies for their own gain. The thought of their gaining access to the Arbor Vitae's secrets, to the potential for life extension and regeneration, sent a shiver of dread through Elara and Cassion. The disappearance of the physician Elara now seemed even more sinister. Had the Obsidian Order been involved? Had they silenced her to prevent her knowledge from falling into the wrong hands, or had Theron delivered her to them as a further offering in their dark pact? The heartwood now took on a new significance. It was not merely an ingredient. It was likely the key to the Arbor Vitae's most profound secrets, a source of immense power that both Theron and the Obsidian Order coveted. Queen Isolde's frantic warning to protect the heartwood was not just about safeguarding a physical substance but preserving an ancient legacy from those who would corrupt and exploit it. As Elara and Cassion pieced together this terrifying puzzle, the true depth of the darkness surrounding Ethelgard became chillingly apparent. Theron's ambition was not an isolated act of treachery. It was intertwined with a shadowy network of forbidden knowledge and sinister forces. The whispers in the castle were not just echoes of past intrigues. They were the subtle murmurings of a looming threat, an ancient evil stirring in the shadows. The alchemist's legacy was not just about extending life. It was about the balance of life and death, a delicate equilibrium that the Obsidian Order sought to disrupt for their own nefarious ends. Elara and Cashin knew that they had stumbled upon something far greater and far more dangerous than a simple conspiracy for the throne. They were now caught in a struggle for the very soul of their world, a battle against ancient shadows and the corrupting influence of forbidden power. The dawn of deceit had broken, revealing a landscape far more perilous than they had ever imagined, a path leading directly into the looming shadow of the Obsidian Order. The Heartwood secret, the key to an ancient legacy, was now the most precious and most vulnerable treasure they had to protect. Story 21. The Obsidian Mirror and the Price of Forbidden Knowledge. The revelation of the Obsidian Order's involvement cast a pall of ancient dread over Elara and Cashin's understanding of the events that had unfolded within Ethelgard. Theron's ambition, monstrous as it was, now appeared as a mere tendril of a far more insidious and deeply rooted evil. The alchemist's legacy, the potential for manipulating life itself, was not just a scientific pursuit. It was a nexus of power that had drawn the attention of forces dwelling in the darkest corners of their world. The Heartwood, the key to the Arbor Vitae's secrets, became their most urgent concern. Its true nature remained elusive, but the recurring symbol of the radiant tree and Queen Isolde's desperate plea for its protection suggested it was far more than just a botanical ingredient. It was likely a source of immense power, a focal point of the Arbor Vitae's ancient knowledge, and a treasure that the Obsidian Order hungered to possess. Their investigation led them to the oldest sections of the Royal Library, where they discovered texts predating the known history of Eldoria, bound in strange, leathery hides and written in languages long forgotten. Within these cryptic volumes, they found fragmented references to the Arbor Vitae and their connection to the World Tree, a mythical entity said to be the source of all life and the repository of its deepest secrets. The Heartwood was described as a fragment of this World Tree, imbued with its vital essence and capable of granting extraordinary abilities. The Obsidian Order was depicted in these ancient texts as a parasitic entity, a group that sought to exploit the power of the World Tree for their own dark purposes, twisting its life-giving energies into instruments of decay and domination. They were portrayed as masters of shadow magic and forbidden rituals, their influence stretching across centuries, always lurking in the periphery, waiting for an opportunity to seize control of the tree's power. The pact between Theron and the Obsidian Order now made terrifying sense. Theron, blinded by his lust for earthly power, had unknowingly offered them a key to something far greater, a power that could shatter the delicate balance of their world. Queen Isolde's imprisonment and the disappearance of the physician Elara were likely orchestrated to secure this prize for the Order, silencing those who understood its true significance and could potentially prevent its misuse. The cryptic warning about the luminescence and the Heartwood took on a new urgency. The deep-sea algae, with its extraordinary regenerative properties, was perhaps a component needed to unlock the full potential of the Heartwood, a catalyst for its power. Protecting the Heartwood meant not only safeguarding a physical object but also preventing the Obsidian Order from completing their dark designs. Their search for the Heartwood led them to the castle's hidden chambers, secret vaults built into the very foundations of Ethelgard, their existence known only to a select few within the royal lineage. Following the clues gleaned from Queen Isolde's notes and the ancient texts, they navigated a labyrinth of stone corridors and concealed doorways, the air growing heavy with the scent of damp earth and forgotten magic. In the deepest chamber, bathed in the faint glow of phosphorescent moss that clung to the walls, they found it, the Heartwood. It was not a piece of ordinary wood but a crystalline structure, pulsating with a soft inner light, its facets shimmering with all the colors of a dawn sky. It rested on a stone pedestal, surrounded by intricate carvings that depicted the World Tree and the entwined symbols of the Arbor Vitae. As Elara reached out to touch it, a vision flooded her mind, a verdant tree of immense size, its roots delving deep into the earth, its branches reaching towards the heavens, its heartwood glowing with a radiant energy that sustained all life. She saw the Obsidian Order as shadowy figures, their hands reaching out to corrupt this source of life, to twist its power for their own malevolent purposes. The vision was both beautiful and terrifying, a stark warning of the immense power they now held within their grasp and the catastrophic consequences should it fall into the wrong hands. Suddenly, the chamber was plunged into darkness. A cold, malevolent presence filled the air, and a voice, like the rustling of dry bones, echoed around them. "So, you have found it. The key to our ascension." Shadowy figures materialized from the darkness, their eyes glowing with an unnatural red light. They were the agents of the Obsidian Order, drawn to the Heartwood's power like moths to a flame. Their presence was a chilling confirmation of the ancient texts, the embodiment of the parasitic evil that sought to consume the very source of life. Elara and Cashin knew that they were now facing a threat far greater than Theron's ambition. They were standing against an ancient darkness, a force that had lurked in the shadows for centuries, waiting for this moment. The Heartwood, the alchemist's legacy, was not just a key to life extension. It was a linchpin in a cosmic struggle between light and shadow. The dawn of deceit had broken, revealing the true enemy, and the battle for the fate of their world had just begun. The obsidian mirror of forbidden knowledge reflected a terrifying future, and the price of protecting the Heartwood would be higher than they could ever have imagined. Story 22. The Guardians of the Heartwood and the Obsidian Tide. The sudden plunge into darkness in the Heartwood chamber was not merely an absence of light, it was a tangible manifestation of the malevolent presence that had descended upon them. The air grew heavy, thick with an unnatural cold that seeped into their bones, and the echoing voice, like the rasping of ancient stone, sent shivers of primal fear down their spines. The shadowy figures that materialized were the embodiment of the ancient texts, their glowing red eyes piercing the gloom, their very presence radiating an aura of forbidden power and cold intent. They were the Obsidian Order, and they had come for the Heartwood. Elara, despite the terror that threatened to consume her, instinctively moved to shield the crystalline Heartwood, her hands outstretched as if to protect a fragile flame from a sudden gust of wind. The vision of the World Tree and the encroaching shadows of the Obsidian Order flashed through her mind, a stark reminder of the immense stakes. This was not just about Eldoria. It was about preserving the very balance of life from an ancient and corrupting force. Cashin, though his hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword, knew that cold steel would be woefully inadequate against such otherworldly adversaries. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable sense of dark magic that spoke of rituals and powers far beyond his mortal comprehension. Their only advantage was the element of surprise. The Obsidian Order had clearly not anticipated their discovery of the Heartwood. "Foolish mortals," the rasping voice echoed again, closer now, as one of the shadowy figures glided forward, its movements unnaturally fluid. "You have stumbled upon something you cannot possibly understand. The Heartwood belongs to those who can truly wield its power, those who can usher in an age of shadow. The Heartwood is a source of life, not darkness." Elara retorted, her voice trembling slightly but holding a core of defiance. "Your order seeks only to corrupt and destroy." A chilling laugh, devoid of warmth or humor, echoed through the chamber. "Life and death are but two sides of the same coin, little queen. We merely seek to rebalance the scales. And with the Heartwood in our possession, that balance will finally tip in our favor." As the obsidian figures advanced, their shadowy forms seeming to coalesce and solidify, Elara remembered the coded notes, the alchemical formulas, and the whispers of the Arbor Vitae. Their knowledge, however fragmented, might be their only weapon against this ancient evil. "There are safeguards," Cashin interjected, his mind racing. "The Arbor Vitae, they would have protected the Heartwood." He recalled the intricate carvings surrounding the pedestal, the symbols they had dismissed as mere decoration. Could they be some form of magical ward? Elara's gaze fell upon the carvings, her understanding of ancient symbols, gleaned from her time in the Royal Library, suddenly sharpening. She recognized patterns, alignments, and subtle flows within the intricate designs. They were not just decorative, they were a complex network of protective runes. "The carvings, they are a key," she exclaimed. "They resonate with the Heartwood's energy. If we can activate them—" But time was running out. The obsidian figures were upon them, their shadowy hands reaching out for the pulsating crystal. Elara and Cassian knew they had to act quickly, to tap into the Arbor Vitae's ancient magic before the Heartwood fell into the clutches of the Obsidian Order. Remembering the alchemical formulas, Elara recalled a specific sequence involving rare phosphorescent moss, the very substance that illuminated the chamber. Could it be a catalyst? Acting on instinct, she reached out and gathered a handful of the glowing moss, crushing it in her hand. A faint, ethereal light pulsed from the crushed moss, and she instinctively pressed her hand against one of the key carvings on the pedestal. A low hum resonated through the chamber, and the intricate carvings began to glow with a soft, golden light. The obsidian figures recoiled, hissing as if burned by an invisible flame. The air crackled with a renewed energy, a force that felt ancient and protective. "The wards," Cassian realized. "They are attuned to the Heartwood's energy." Working in unison, Elara and Cassian frantically traced the patterns of the carvings, pressing the phosphorescent moss against key points, activating more and more of the ancient runes. The golden light intensified, pushing back the encroaching shadows, creating a protective barrier around the Heartwood. The rasping voice of the Obsidian leader echoed in fury. "You cannot stop us. We have waited centuries for this moment." The obsidian figures lunged forward, their shadowy forms crashing against the glowing barrier. The air filled with a cacophony of hisses and crackling energy as the ancient magic of the Arbor Vitae clashed against the dark power of the Obsidian Order. Elara and Cassian knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The Obsidian Order was powerful, their hunger for the Heartwood immense. They needed a way to not only protect the Heartwood but to sever the Obsidian Order's connection to Eldoria entirely. Their thoughts turned to the physician Elara, the vanished guardian of the Arbor Vitae's secrets. Her coded notes hinted at a deeper understanding of the Heartwood's power and the means to counteract dark magic. Somewhere within the ruins of the Physic Garden or the hidden chambers of Ethelgard, the key to defeating the Obsidian Tide might still lie hidden. The guardians of the Heartwood had been awakened, but the battle for its survival, and for the fate of their world, had only just begun. The obsidian mirror reflected a relentless darkness, and the price of protecting the Heartwood would demand not only courage but also the rediscovery of a long-lost legacy. Story 23. The Echoes of Elara and the Unbinding Ritual. The golden light emanating from the activated runes around the Heartwood pulsed with a life-affirming energy, pushing back the encroaching shadows of the Obsidian Order. The hissing and crackling intensified as the ancient magic of the Arbor Vitae clashed against the dark power of the intruders, creating a volatile barrier that held them at bay, but only just. Elara and Cassian could feel the strain on the wards, the relentless pressure of an ancient evil seeking to break through. "They will not be deterred," Cassian gasped, his face illuminated by the golden glow. "They have waited too long." Elara's mind raced, sifting through the fragmented knowledge gleaned from Queen Isolde's notes and the cryptic warnings of the ancient texts. The physician Elara, the vanished guardian, held the key, she was certain. Her understanding of the Heartwood and the Obsidian Order must have been profound. The reference to the unbinding ritual in one of the later coded passages flashed in her memory, a desperate measure perhaps to sever the Order's connection to their world. "The unbinding ritual," Elara murmured, more to herself than to Cassian. "Elara, she must have known how to break their hold. But where would we find it?" Cassian asked, his gaze darting between the straining wards and the shadowy figures that writhed against them. Their eyes met, a shared understanding passing between them. The Physic Garden, the sanctuary of forbidden knowledge, was the most likely place. If the physician Elara had anticipated such an attack, she might have left a final safeguard there, a way to counteract the Obsidian Order's dark magic. "We need to get back to the physic garden," Elara said urgently. "There has to be something there, a final key." But leaving the Heartwood unguarded, even for a moment, was a terrifying prospect. The Obsidian Order was relentless, their hunger palpable. "I will stay here," Cashin declared, his hand firm on his sword hilt. "I will maintain the wards for as long as I can. You must go, Elara. Find what we need." Tears welled in Elara's eyes at his selfless offer. "But Cashin—" "Go," he insisted, his voice firm. "The fate of Eldoria, perhaps more, rests on it." With a heavy heart, Elara nodded. She knew he was right. Speed was crucial. She had to trust in Cashin's courage and the strength of the ancient wards. Leaving Cashin standing as a solitary beacon of golden light against the encroaching darkness, Elara turned and fled through the secret passages, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The urgency of her mission propelled her forward, the image of the Heartwood's radiant glow and the looming shadows of the Obsidian Order burned into her mind. She raced through the familiar corridors of Ethelgard, the grand tapestries and imposing portraits now seeming like silent witnesses to a cosmic struggle. The castle, once a symbol of royal power and intrigue, had become a battleground between ancient forces. Reaching the overgrown physic garden, the air felt different, charged with a subtle energy she hadn't noticed before. The skeletal remains of the laboratory, the choked flower beds, all seemed to hum with a faint resonance. Elara frantically searched the ruins, her hands brushing against crumbling stones and withered leaves. She remembered the hidden compartment where they had found the coded notes. Perhaps there was more. Her fingers brushed against a loose stone in the wall of the former laboratory. With a surge of adrenaline, she pulled it free, revealing a small, intricately carved wooden box, identical to the one that had held the poison. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried herbs, was a single obsidian mirror, its surface smooth and dark, reflecting no light. As Elara picked it up, a whisper seemed to enter her mind, a faint echo of a woman's voice, filled with wisdom and a profound sadness. The obsidian mirror, it reflects their true nature. The unbinding requires sacrifice. Look into the depths. Understanding dawned in Elara's mind. This was the physician Elara's legacy, a tool to combat the darkness. The mirror would reveal the true forms of the Obsidian Order and the unbinding ritual. It would require a sacrifice. But what kind? Clutching the obsidian mirror, Elara raced back towards the Heartwood chamber, the echoes of the physician's voice guiding her. She could feel the wards weakening, the golden light flickering under the relentless assault of the Obsidian Order. Reaching the chamber, the scene was dire. Cashin was wounded, his sword stained with an unnatural black ichor, the golden light of the wards dimming precariously. The shadowy figures were closer now, their glowing red eyes fixed on the pulsating Heartwood. "Elara!" Cashin cried out, his voice strained. "Hurry!" Holding the obsidian mirror aloft, Elara stepped within the weakening circle of the wards. As the mirror faced the obsidian figures, their shadowy forms flickered and distorted, revealing grotesque, insectal shapes beneath, their red eyes burning with ancient malice. A collective shriek of fury erupted from the Obsidian Order as their true forms were revealed. The mirror disrupted their illusions, stripping away their carefully crafted human guises. "The unbinding," the physician Elara's echo whispered in Elara's mind. "Reflect their gaze, sever the connection." Understanding the sacrifice required, Elara focused her will, her gaze locking onto the leader of the Obsidian Order through the surface of the mirror. She felt a searing pain as a part of her own life force flowed into the obsidian glass, empowering it. As her energy poured into the mirror, a beam of pure, white light erupted from its surface, striking the obsidian leader. A horrific shriek tore through the chamber as the shadowy figure recoiled, its insectal form dissolving into wisps of black smoke. The connection was severed. The remaining obsidian figures, their leader vanquished, shrieked in unison and dissolved into nothingness, the oppressive darkness receding with them. The golden light of the wards flared brightly once more, renewed. Elara staggered, weak but alive. Cashin rushed to her side, his face etched with relief and concern. The heartwood pulsed with a steady, reassuring light. The obsidian tide had been turned back, but the cost had been significant. The echoes of Elara, the physician, had guided them, but the unbinding had demanded a piece of Elara herself. The dawn of deceit had broken, and in the face of ancient darkness, a new dawn, tinged with sacrifice, had arrived. Story 24. The Lingering Shadow and the Seed of Doubt. The immediate aftermath of the Obsidian Order's banishment left a profound stillness in the Heartwood Chamber, the oppressive darkness replaced by the gentle, life-affirming glow of the crystalline heartwood and the renewed radiance of the ancient wards. Elara leaned heavily on Cashin, the exhaustion of the unbinding ritual weighing heavily upon her, a tangible absence where a sliver of her life force had been willingly given. The obsidian mirror, now cool and inert in her hand, was a silent testament to the sacrifice made. Cashin's relief at their survival was palpable, but his concern for Elara was evident in his every touch and worried glance. The unnatural black ichor on his sword had begun to dissipate, the dark magic of the Obsidian Order receding like a tide pulled back by an unseen force. The heartwood pulsed steadily, its light a comforting reassurance that the ancient balance had, for now, been restored. They knew, however, that their victory was likely temporary. The Obsidian Order was an ancient entity, their reach extending across centuries. Their banishment from the Heartwood Chamber did not mean their destruction. They would undoubtedly regroup, their hunger for the Heartwood's power undiminished. The echoes of the physician Elara's warning about sacrifice lingered in the air, a reminder that the fight against this ancient darkness was far from over. Returning to the upper levels of Ethelgard, they found the castle in a state of bewildered calm. The dramatic events in the Great Hall, the king's reappearance, Theron's arrest, and the subsequent, unexplained tremors that had briefly shaken the very foundations of the castle, a residual effect of the Obsidian Order's thwarted attempt, had left the court in a state of hushed speculation. King Alaric, though weakened by his ordeal, was now fully aware of the far greater threat that had been lurking in the shadows, a threat that Theron had unwittingly invited into their world. The tale of the Obsidian Order and the Heartwood was met with a mixture of fear and disbelief by the court. Ancient legends, once dismissed as folklore, now took on a terrifying new significance. King Alaric, however, recognized the gravity of the situation. He had witnessed the malevolent presence in the Heartwood Chamber, the raw power of the shadowy figures, and he knew that Eldoria was now facing a danger unlike any it had encountered before. A council was convened, comprised of the king, Elara, Cashin, and Lord Elmsworth, to discuss the immediate and long-term implications of their discoveries. The priority was twofold: to safeguard the Heartwood and to understand the full extent of the Obsidian Order's influence and their potential next moves. The Heartwood was moved to a more secure location within the deepest vaults of Ethelgard, protected by the ancient wards and a contingent of the king's most trusted guards. Elara and Cashin, now recognized as the guardians of this sacred artifact, dedicated themselves to studying the recovered notes of Queen Isolde and the physician Elara, searching for any further clues about the Obsidian Order and how to permanently sever their connection to their world. Their research revealed more about the Arbor Vitae, their long history as protectors of the World Tree's fragments, and their intricate knowledge of countermagic and banishment rituals. The physician Elara, it became clear, had been a high-ranking member of this ancient order, her disappearance likely orchestrated by the Obsidian Order or by Theron under their influence. The garden beyond the walls that Queen Isolde had spoken of was not just the physic garden but a metaphorical realm, a state of enlightenment and connection to the natural world that the Arbor Vitae sought to cultivate. As they delved deeper into this esoteric knowledge, a seed of doubt began to sprout in Elara's mind. The physician Elara's warnings about sacrifice. Had she meant only the giving of life force, or was there a deeper, more personal cost involved in wielding such ancient power? The obsidian mirror, a tool of revelation and banishment, felt strangely cold in her hand, as if it held secrets yet to be unveiled. Days turned into weeks, and while Ethelgard slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy, the lingering shadow of the Obsidian Order remained. There were subtle signs, fleeting glimpses in darkened corridors, a sudden drop in temperature in certain parts of the castle, whispers on the wind that seemed to carry an alien cadence. The ancient evil had been repelled, but it had not been destroyed. One evening, as Elara stood by a window overlooking the moonlit gardens, a familiar voice echoed in her mind, the faint whisper of the physician Elara. The connection. It is not severed. A tether remains. Look to the source. The words sent a chill down her spine. The unbinding ritual, despite its apparent success, had not completely severed the Obsidian Order's link to their world. There was still a tether, a point of connection that they could potentially exploit. And the source, what could that be? The heartwood itself? Or something else, something yet undiscovered? The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The ancient darkness still loomed, and Elara knew that the guardians of the heartwood would need to remain vigilant, their quest for knowledge and protection continuing. The dawn of deceit had broken, revealing not just earthly treachery but a cosmic struggle against an ancient evil. The lingering shadow of the Obsidian Order served as a constant reminder that the price of forbidden knowledge was eternal vigilance, and the seed of doubt planted in Elara's mind hinted at further sacrifices yet to come. Story 25. The Serpent's Coil and the Whispers of the Deep. The physician Elara's lingering whisper, echoing in the quiet corners of Elara's mind. The connection. It is not severed. A tether remains. Look to the source. Cast a pall over the fragile peace that had settled upon Ethelgard. The immediate threat of the Obsidian Order had been repelled, but the knowledge that a tether, an unseen link, still bound them to their ancient evil created a persistent unease. The victory in the Heartwood Chamber felt like a breath held, a temporary reprieve before the next inevitable surge of darkness. Elara and Cashin redoubled their efforts, poring over the cryptic texts and alchemical formulas left behind by Queen Isolde and the physician Elara. The source remained elusive, a phantom limb of the Obsidian Order's influence that they desperately needed to identify and sever. They revisited the Physic Garden, searching for any hidden clues, any overlooked symbols or remnants of the Arbor Vitae's knowledge that might shed light on this lingering connection. Their search led them to a hidden grotto beneath the Physic Garden, a place of damp earth and echoing silence, accessible only through a concealed passage behind a crumbling fountain. Within this subterranean space, they discovered a series of intricate murals carved into the stone walls, depicting the World Tree and the Obsidian Order locked in an eternal struggle. One mural, particularly striking, showed the Obsidian Order drawing power from a deep, swirling vortex of shadow, a source that seemed to lie beyond the boundaries of their world. A thin, serpentine line connected this vortex to the Heartwood, a visual representation of the tether the physician Elara had warned them about. The source, they realized with a chilling certainty, was not within Eldoria itself but in some other dimension, a wellspring of dark energy from which the Obsidian Order drew their power. Severing the tether meant finding a way to disrupt this connection, to cut off their access to this extraplanar source. The physician Elara's notes offered a potential solution, a ritual of severing, requiring specific alchemical preparations and a deep understanding of the Obsidian Order's shadow magic. The key ingredient, mentioned only in veiled terms, was a rare luminescent moss that grew only in subterranean depths exposed to a specific lunar alignment, a moss unlike the phosphorescent variety they had used to activate the wards. Their search for this rare moss led them to the ancient catacombs beneath Ethelgard, a labyrinthine network of tunnels and burial chambers that stretched deep beneath the castle foundations. The air here was heavy with the dust of ages and the silent presence of the departed. As they navigated the winding passages, they encountered faint traces of the Obsidian Order's presence, residual pockets of cold, unnatural energy and unsettlingly familiar shadows that seemed to flicker at the edges of their vision. Finally, in a vast, cavernous chamber, illuminated by an ethereal, moon-like glow emanating from a fissure in the ceiling, they found it, the luminescent moss. It pulsed with a soft, otherworldly light, its delicate tendrils shimmering with an inner radiance. As Elara reached out to touch it, she felt a faint connection to the deep, swirling vortex depicted in the murals, a chilling awareness of the Obsidian Order's distant power. Gathering the moss, they returned to the Heartwood Chamber, the murals in the grotto now etched clearly in their minds. The ritual of severing, as described in the physician Elara's notes, required them to create a conduit, a mirror image of the tether, and then disrupt it with a specific alchemical mixture prepared with the luminescent moss, focusing the energy of the heartwood to sever the connection. The ritual was complex and demanding, requiring precise timing and unwavering focus. As they prepared the alchemical mixture, the whispers of the deep seemed to intensify, a subtle pressure building in the air, as if the Obsidian Order sensed their attempt to sever the tether. With the mixture prepared, they stood before the heartwood, the serpentine line in the mural now a vivid image in their minds. Using the obsidian mirror as a focal point, they began the ritual, chanting the ancient words of the Arbor Vitae, their voices echoing in the chamber. The luminescent moss pulsed with an increasing intensity, its light mirroring the ethereal glow from the cavern. As they reached the crucial point of the ritual, the heartwood pulsed with a surge of energy, and a beam of pure light shot forth, striking the obsidian mirror. The mirror flared, and for a moment, Elara saw a reflection of the deep, swirling vortex, the source of the Obsidian Order's power. With a final, focused incantation, they directed the heartwood's energy through the mirror, towards the reflected vortex. A shockwave of energy rippled through the chamber, and a piercing shriek echoed in their minds, a sound of ancient rage and frustration. The subtle pressure in the air dissipated, the whispers of the deep faded into silence. The tether was severed. Exhausted but triumphant, Elara and Cashin collapsed onto the cold stone floor. The heartwood glowed steadily, its light no longer threatened by the encroaching shadows. The serpent's coil, the unseen link to the Obsidian Order's dark source, had been broken. But they knew that the ancient evil would not be vanquished so easily. They had bought themselves time, a precious window to further understand the alchemist's legacy and prepare for the inevitable return of the darkness. The dawn of deceit had broken, and in severing the serpent's coil, they had taken another crucial step in the long and arduous fight for the light. Story 26. The Arbor Vitae's Wisdom and the Looming Return. The silence that followed the severing of the tether was profound, a welcome absence of the insidious whispers and the oppressive pressure that had clung to Ethelgard like a shroud. Elara and Cashin lay exhausted in the Heartwood Chamber, the radiant glow of the ancient crystal a comforting presence in the aftermath of their arduous ritual. The obsidian mirror, resting beside Elara, no longer felt like a conduit to a terrifying darkness but a tool of hard-won victory. However, the physician Elara's final whisper, "Look to the source," continued to resonate in their minds, a subtle reminder that while a connection had been severed, the ultimate source of the Obsidian Order's power remained untouched. They had bought themselves time, a precious respite to delve deeper into the Arbor Vitae's wisdom and prepare for the inevitable resurgence of their ancient enemy. Their focus shifted once more to the coded notes and the ancient texts, their understanding now sharpened by their direct confrontation with the Obsidian Order and their glimpse into the swirling vortex of shadow that fueled their power. The Arbor Vitae's teachings spoke of the World Tree as a source of interconnectedness, a cosmic entity whose roots delved into all realms of existence. The Obsidian Order, they learned, were parasitic entities that sought to sever these connections, to draw power for themselves by creating rifts and imbalances in the fabric of reality. The heartwood, a fragment of the world tree, pulsed with its life-giving energy, a beacon of balance in a world threatened by shadow. The arbor vitae's guardians, throughout the ages, had developed intricate rituals and safeguards to protect these fragments and to counteract the obsidian order's influence. The unbinding ritual had been one such measure, a way to temporarily sever a direct connection. But the ultimate solution lay in understanding the source of the obsidian order's power and finding a way to permanently disrupt it. Their research led them to the concept of anchor points, locations or objects in their world that served as conduits for the obsidian order's energy, allowing them to exert their influence even without a direct tether to the heartwood. Identifying and neutralizing these anchor points became their next crucial objective. The ancient texts hinted that these anchor points were often places of significant negative energy, sites of great suffering, betrayal, or ancient rituals performed in the obsidian order's name. They could also be objects imbued with dark magic, artifacts that resonated with their shadowy power. Their investigation took them beyond the confines of Ethelgard, into the forgotten corners of Eldoria, to places whispered about in fearful legends. They explored desolate battlefields where ancient evils had been unleashed, crumbling ruins of forgotten temples dedicated to dark gods, and sites of profound sorrow and loss. At each of these locations, they sensed the lingering presence of the obsidian order, faint echoes of their dark energy clinging to the very stones and soil. They learned to recognize the subtle signs: an unnatural chill in the air, the fleeting scent of decay, whispers that seemed to carry no discernible language but resonated with a sense of ancient malice. Following these trails of residual darkness, they began to identify potential anchor points: a crumbling obsidian altar hidden in a forgotten mountain pass, a tarnished silver amulet buried beneath a site of ancient betrayal, and a series of standing stones arranged in a pattern that pulsed with a faint, unsettling energy. The Arbor Vitae's texts provided methods for neutralizing these anchor points, often involving intricate rituals utilizing specific herbs, resonant frequencies, and the focused energy of the heartwood. Elara's growing connection to the heartwood, a consequence of the unbinding ritual, allowed her to sense these dark resonances and to channel its energy with increasing precision. One by one, they began to neutralize the anchor points, performing the ancient rituals, cleansing the tainted sites, and disrupting the flow of dark energy into their world. With each anchor point neutralized, the lingering shadow of the obsidian order seemed to recede slightly, the oppressive atmosphere lifting ever so subtly. However, they knew that the ultimate source remained. The deep, swirling vortex of shadow depicted in the grotto murals was the heart of their enemy's power, a place beyond their current reach. The Arbor Vitae's wisdom spoke of a potential way to sever this connection permanently, a perilous undertaking that involved traversing the veils between worlds, a journey into the heart of the obsidian order's domain. The whispers of the deep had fallen silent, but the ancient texts hinted at a looming return, a time when the obsidian order would inevitably attempt to re-establish their connection. Elara and Cashin knew that their quest was far from over. They had gained valuable knowledge, neutralized key threats within their own world, and learned to wield the power of the heartwood. But the ultimate battle against the ancient darkness still lay ahead, a confrontation that would likely demand even greater courage and sacrifice. The dawn of deceit had broken, and in embracing the Arbor Vitae's wisdom, they were preparing for the inevitable twilight of a cosmic war. Story 27. The Veils Between Worlds and the Obsidian Citadel. The neutralization of the Obsidian Order's anchor points brought a fragile sense of hope to Eldoria, a subtle lightening of the oppressive atmosphere that had clung to the land since their emergence. Elara and Cashin, guided by the ancient wisdom of the Arbor Vitae, had successfully disrupted the flow of dark energy into their world, pushing back the encroaching shadows. Yet, the knowledge of the deep, swirling vortex, the ultimate source of the Obsidian Order's power, remained a looming threat, a silent promise of their eventual return. The Arbor Vitae's texts, particularly the more esoteric passages attributed to the Order's elder guardians, spoke of the veils between worlds, the thin boundaries that separated their reality from others. These veils, they learned, were not impenetrable barriers but rather permeable membranes, capable of being traversed under specific conditions or through the manipulation of powerful energies. The deep vortex, the Obsidian Order's source, was located beyond one of these veils, in a realm steeped in shadow and ancient malice. The prospect of traversing these veils was daunting, fraught with unknown dangers. The Arbor Vitae's warnings were clear. The realms beyond were often hostile to mortal life, inhabited by entities and energies that could shatter the mind and corrupt the soul. Yet, the texts also hinted at a way to navigate these treacherous paths, utilizing the Heartwood's resonant energy as a guide and a shield. Queen Isolde's notes contained fragmented references to interdimensional travel, suggesting that she and the physician Elara had also been exploring these forbidden realms. There were cryptic diagrams of swirling patterns and astronomical alignments, hinting at specific times and locations where the veils were thinner, more easily breached. One recurring symbol was that of a celestial convergence, a rare alignment of 3 moons that was said to weaken the boundaries between worlds. As Elara and Cassian studied these clues, they realized that such a convergence was approaching, a window of opportunity that they could potentially exploit to reach the Obsidian Order's source. The time was drawing near, and the urgency of their mission intensified. Their preparations became focused on this perilous journey. They gathered rare herbs and alchemical ingredients mentioned in the Arbor Vitae's rituals for traversing the veils, meticulously following the ancient instructions. Elara, her connection to the Heartwood deepening, learned to sense the subtle fluctuations in the veil's fabric, guided by its resonant hum. Cassian, drawing upon his knowledge of ancient languages and celestial cartography, deciphered Queen Isolde's cryptic diagrams, identifying the potential locations where the veils might be thinnest during the lunar convergence. Their research pointed to a remote and desolate region of Eldoria, a windswept plateau known as the Whispering Crags, where ancient stones stood in a circular formation, said to mark a nexus point between worlds. It was a place steeped in legend, rumored to be haunted by otherworldly entities and imbued with a strange, unsettling energy. As the celestial convergence drew nearer, Elara, Cassian, and a small, trusted company of King Alaric's most loyal guards journeyed to the Whispering Crags. The air grew thin and cold as they ascended the plateau, the ancient stones looming against the bruised twilight sky. A palpable sense of anticipation and trepidation hung in the air. Following Queen Isolde's diagrams, they positioned themselves within the stone circle as the 3 moons began their rare alignment, their silvery light bathing the crags in an ethereal glow. Elara held the Heartwood aloft, its radiant energy pulsing in response to the celestial convergence, creating a shimmering vortex of light within the circle. The veil between worlds shimmered and tore open before them, revealing a swirling abyss of shadow and alien energies. The air crackled with an otherworldly power, and faint whispers, laced with ancient malice, echoed from the depths. Taking a deep breath, their hearts pounding in unison, Elara and Cassian stepped through the veil, leaving the familiar world of Eldoria behind. They found themselves in a realm of perpetual twilight, a desolate landscape of jagged obsidian spires and swirling shadows. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the oppressive presence of the Obsidian Order. In the distance, looming like a festering wound in the fabric of reality, stood a colossal citadel of black obsidian, pulsating with a malevolent energy. This, they knew, was the heart of the Obsidian Order's power, the source they had come to sever. The journey to the citadel was fraught with peril. Shadowy creatures, twisted parodies of life, stalked the desolate landscape, their glowing red eyes fixed upon the intruders. The very air seemed to resist their presence, attempting to suffocate their light and consume them in darkness. Guided by the Heartwood's radiant glow and their unwavering determination, Elara and Cassian pressed onward, knowing that the fate of their world rested on their ability to reach the Obsidian Citadel and sever the connection at its source. The veils between worlds had been crossed, and the final, perilous confrontation with the ancient darkness awaited. The dawn of deceit had broken, leading them to this alien realm, and the twilight of their ultimate battle was about to descend. Story 28. The Heart of Shadow and the Echo of Sacrifice. The Obsidian Realm pressed in on Elara and Cashin, a suffocating landscape of jagged black spires that clawed at the perpetual twilight sky. The air was thick with the cloying stench of decay and the palpable weight of ancient malice, a stark contrast to the vibrant life they had left behind in Eldoria. The heartwood, held aloft by Elara, pulsed with a steady, defiant light, a small beacon of hope in this desolate domain of shadow. Twisted creatures, born of nightmare and darkness, stalked the jagged terrain, their forms shifting and coalescing in the gloom. Their glowing red eyes, mirroring those of the obsidian figures they had encountered before, fixed on Elara and Cashin with predatory hunger. The journey to the Obsidian Citadel, a monolithic structure of black glass that pierced the oppressive sky in the distance, was a constant struggle for survival. They moved cautiously, guided by the Heartwood's intuitive pull towards the source of the Obsidian Order's power. Cashin's sword, though mortal steel, proved surprisingly effective against the shadowy entities, their forms dissolving into wisps of black smoke upon contact with its enchanted edge, an enchantment unknowingly bestowed upon it by its long proximity to the Heartwood's residual energy within Ethelgard. As they ventured deeper into the Obsidian Realm, the whispers intensified, no longer faint echoes but a cacophony of ancient voices hissing in a language that resonated with a primal fear within their souls. The whispers spoke of their insignificance, of the inevitable triumph of shadow, and of the eternal dominion of the Obsidian Order. Elara, drawing strength from the Heartwood's light and the memory of the lives she sought to protect, fought to silence the insidious voices in her mind. The Obsidian Citadel loomed larger with each step, its black glass surface reflecting the oppressive twilight in a distorted and unsettling manner. Runes of dark magic pulsed across its surface, and a palpable aura of immense power radiated from its core. This was the heart of the shadow, the nexus point of the Obsidian Order's influence. Reaching the citadel's base, they found a massive gateway guarded by two towering figures wreathed in shadow, their red eyes burning with malevolent intensity. These were clearly more powerful than the lesser creatures they had encountered, their forms more solid, their presence radiating a palpable sense of ancient authority. A fierce battle ensued. Cashin fought with the courage of a cornered lion, his sword a blur of silver against the encroaching darkness. Elara, channeling the Heartwood's energy, unleashed bursts of pure light that seared the shadowy guardians, forcing them to recoil. The air crackled with the clash of light and shadow, the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance at the foot of the Obsidian Fortress. Finally, weakened but not defeated, the Guardians dissolved into shrieking wisps of smoke, allowing Elara and Cashin to enter the citadel's dark interior. The air within was even more oppressive, the whispers deafening. The walls pulsed with dark energy, and the very architecture seemed designed to instill fear and despair. They navigated labyrinthine corridors, the Heartwood their only guide, descending deeper into the citadel's core. They passed chambers filled with unsettling artifacts and witnessed shadowy rituals being performed by cloaked figures, their chanting voices adding to the cacophony of whispers. Finally, they reached the heart of the citadel, a vast chamber dominated by the swirling vortex of shadow they had seen in the grotto murals. It pulsed with a malevolent energy, its depths seemingly endless. Suspended above it, connected by shimmering tendrils of darkness, was a fragment of obsidian that mirrored the crystalline heartwood Elara held, a dark echo of its life-giving light. This, they realized, was the true source of the Obsidian Order's power, the anchor point in their realm that sustained their connection to Eldoria and beyond. Severing this dark echo was the key to truly breaking their hold. As they approached the vortex, a figure emerged from the swirling shadows, its form coalescing into a being of pure darkness, its red eyes burning with ancient hatred. This was the leader of the Obsidian Order, the entity they had briefly vanquished in the Heartwood chamber. "You cannot interfere with the ancient order," the shadowy figure hissed, its voice a chorus of 1,000 tormented souls. "This power will be ours. Your world will fall." Another fierce battle erupted, the Heartwood's light clashing against the leader's overwhelming shadow. Elara and Cashin fought with desperation, knowing that failure here meant the eternal dominion of darkness. Remembering the physician Elara's whispers of sacrifice, Elara understood the final price. The connection between the Heartwood and its dark echo was a mirrored one. To sever the echo, she would have to offer a part of the Heartwood's light, a piece of its very essence. With a heavy heart, Elara focused her will, channeling a portion of the Heartwood's radiant energy into the obsidian mirror she still held. The mirror flared with a blinding white light, reflecting the Heartwood's pure essence towards its dark counterpart above the vortex. A piercing shriek echoed through the chamber as the obsidian fragment shattered, its dark energy dissipating into the swirling shadows. The vortex pulsed violently, then began to shrink, its malevolent energy receding. The whispers faded into a deathly silence. The leader of the Obsidian Order roared in fury as its power waned, its shadowy form flickering and dissolving. The connection was broken. Exhausted and drained, Elara and Cashin watched as the heart of Shadow withered and died. The Obsidian realm began to shift, the oppressive darkness receding, replaced by a faint, ethereal light. The echo of sacrifice, the willing offering of the Heartwood's light, had severed the ancient connection. The dawn of deceit had led them to the heart of Shadow, and with a final, selfless act, they had brought the promise of a true dawn to their worlds. Story 29. The Fading Echoes and the Seed of Renewal. The shattering of the obsidian heart above the swirling vortex in the obsidian citadel marked not an end, but a profound shift. The oppressive darkness that had clung to that alien realm began to recede, replaced by a nascent, ethereal light that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the dimension. The malevolent whispers fell silent, the echoes of ancient malice finally extinguished. Elara and Cashin, drained but resolute, watched as the source of the Obsidian Order's power withered, its shadowy tendrils dissolving into nothingness. The Heartwood, now bearing a faint, imperceptible dimming of its radiant glow, the price of its sacrifice, pulsed steadily in Elara's hands, a comforting warmth in the fading chill of the obsidian realm. The connection was severed. The tether that had bound the ancient darkness to their world, and to others, was broken. The journey back through the veils was less arduous, the boundaries between worlds now seemingly more permeable, as if the disruption of the Obsidian Order's power had eased the cosmic tension. They emerged at the Whispering Crags under the soft light of the receding lunar convergence, the ancient stones standing silent sentinels against the dawn. Returning to Ethelgard, they were greeted with a mixture of relief and awe. King Alaric, though frail, felt a tangible lifting of the shadow that had threatened his kingdom. The subtle unease that had lingered in the castle had dissipated, replaced by a sense of lightness and renewed hope. The tales of their journey beyond the veils, though difficult to fully comprehend, were met with a profound gratitude for their selfless courage. The Heartwood was returned to its secure vault, its diminished light a constant reminder of the sacrifice made. Elara and Cashin, now bearing the weight of their experiences in the Obsidian realm, dedicated themselves to understanding the full implications of their actions and the potential for future threats. Their continued study of the Arbor Vitae's wisdom revealed that the severing of the primary source of the Obsidian Order's power would not eradicate them entirely. Like a parasitic vine with many roots, their influence might still linger in other realms, their agents perhaps lying dormant, waiting for another opportunity to exploit weakness and re-establish their connection. Vigilance, the ancient texts stressed, remained paramount. Queen Isolde, in her moments of lucidity, seemed to sense the shift in the cosmic balance. A quiet serenity often settled upon her features, a peacefulness that had been absent for so long. Perhaps, in some unfathomable way, The disruption of the ancient darkness had eased the lingering shadows in her own mind. The physician Elara's echoes, once a guiding whisper, now faded into a gentle silence, a sense of peace emanating from her memory. Her sacrifice, her foresight in leaving behind the obsidian mirror and the knowledge of the unbinding ritual, had been instrumental in their victory. As the seasons turned in Eldoria, a subtle renewal began to take hold. The land seemed to breathe a little easier, the shadows in the forests less oppressive, the whispers on the wind carrying a lighter cadence. The seed of renewal, sown by their courage and the heartwood sacrifice, was beginning to sprout. Elara and Cashin, forever changed by their journey into the heart of shadow, remained the guardians of the heartwood, their bond forged in the crucible of cosmic conflict. They continued to study the arbor vitae's wisdom, preparing for any future resurgence of the obsidian order, their vigilance a silent promise to protect their world. The dawn of deceit had broken, leading them on a perilous journey beyond the veils. They had faced ancient darkness and paid a heavy price for victory. The echoes of sacrifice lingered, a reminder of the cost of protecting the light. But in the fading shadows, a seed of renewal had been planted, a promise of a brighter future for Eldoria, a testament to the enduring power of courage, sacrifice, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. The whispers of ancient malice had fallen silent, replaced by the quiet hope of a world slowly healing, forever marked by the battles fought in the twilight realms. Story 30. The stillness before the storm and the gathering whispers. The quietude that settled upon Eldoria in the wake of the Obsidian Order's apparent defeat was a fragile thing, a deceptive stillness before an unspoken storm. The land seemed to sigh in relief, the oppressive shadows receding, allowing the warmth of the sun and the gentle rhythm of nature to reassert themselves. Yet, for Elara and Cashin, a subtle unease persisted, a prickling awareness that the ancient darkness, though seemingly banished, was not truly gone. The heartwood, its radiant glow softened but still potent, rested securely in its vault, a silent guardian against future threats. Elara and Cashin, now bearing the mantle of its protectors with a quiet solemnity, continued their study of the arbor vitae's lore. The ancient text spoke of cycles, of the ebb and flow of cosmic energies, and warned that even the most potent darkness could lie dormant, gathering strength for a renewed assault. The fading echoes of the physician Elara had left a sense of peace, but her final directive, "Look to the source," continued to resonate, a subtle prod to remain vigilant. They had severed the primary tether to the Obsidian Order's power, but the true nature of that extraplanar vortex, its potential for regeneration or the existence of other connections, remained a haunting unknown. Life in Ethelgard slowly resumed its rhythm. King Alaric, his spirit renewed by the lifting of the shadow and the improved well-being of Queen Isolde, began the arduous task of rebuilding trust and stability within the kingdom. Queen Isolde, though still fragile, experienced longer periods of lucidity, her memories of the Physic Garden and her collaboration with the other Elara occasionally surfacing, offering fragmented glimpses into their shared research. However, subtle anomalies began to surface, whispers on the periphery of their awareness. A sudden, inexplicable chill in a sunlit room. A fleeting shadow that seemed to move independently. A sense of being watched by unseen eyes. These were minor occurrences, easily dismissed as tricks of the light or the lingering effects of their recent ordeal, yet they chipped away at the fragile peace, stirring a sense of foreboding in Elara and Cashin. Their research into the Arbor Vitae's texts revealed warnings about the sleeper agents of the Obsidian Order, individuals or entities subtly influenced by their dark magic, lying dormant within the fabric of the world, waiting for a signal to awaken and serve their master's will. The possibility that Theron, in his pact with the Order, had unknowingly become one such agent, or had facilitated the planting of others within Eldoria, was a chilling prospect. One evening, as Elara stood watch in the Heartwood chamber, a faint tremor ran through the castle, so subtle that only she, attuned to the Heartwood's energies, seemed to notice it. The Heartwood pulsed erratically for a moment, its light flickering as if disturbed by a distant resonance. A whisper, cold and alien, brushed against the edges of her mind, a fleeting echo of the Obsidian Order's ancient malice. She shared her concerns with Cassian, and together they intensified their vigilance, their senses acutely attuned to any further disturbances. They revisited the sites where they had neutralized the anchor points, seeking any signs of residual dark energy or attempts at re-establishment. Their investigation led them to a remote shrine, nestled deep within a forgotten forest, a place where ancient rituals had once been performed in the Obsidian Order's name. They had cleansed the site previously, but now they discovered a faint, pulsating symbol etched into the altar, a mark they had overlooked before. As Elara touched it, a jolt of cold energy surged through her, and a fragmented vision flooded her mind. Shadowy figures performing a ritual, chanting in the alien tongue, their focus directed towards a distant, swirling vortex. The symbol, they realized, was a dormant beacon, a potential conduit for the Obsidian Order to re-establish a connection. Its activation had likely been the cause of the tremor Elara had felt. The whispers were not just lingering echoes, they were gathering, coalescing into a renewed threat. The stillness was broken. The storm was gathering once more. Elara and Cassian knew that the respite was over. The Obsidian Order was not defeated, they were merely regrouping, their sleeper agents stirring, their ancient malice seeking a new foothold in their world. The dawn of deceit had led them to confront cosmic darkness, and now, in the deceptive quietude, the whispers of a looming return signaled the beginning of a new, and perhaps even more perilous, chapter in their fight for the light. The seed of renewal needed to be nurtured, protected from the encroaching shadows that were once again beginning to stir.